Hogwarts, the first capitalist of the magical world. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 51. Talking about chapters and classic long and difficult sentences in the principal and -039s. Time flies, and soon the first week of the new semester is over. During this week, Hogwarts was filled with an atmosphere of harmony and joy. In terms of learning, with Karl as the ace teaching assistant, the educational burden of teachers in various subjects has been reduced a lot. The grades of freshmen in all colleges have improved significantly, with Hufflepuff being the most obvious. It jumped from the bottom of the 4 major colleges to the second to last among the 4 major colleges. Such historic progress made the entire academy extremely excited, and Cedric even threatened to kiss Karl in person to express his gratitude. He failed, until he was forced back by a big punch and a stern look from the other party. In terms of entertainment, with the help of Professor Snape, Karl's Hearthstone card game was officially launched. It quickly became popular throughout Hogwarts. And now in the cafeteria, you can always see groups of 3 or 5 students who are not playing Hearthstone together. The 1000 card packs prepared at the beginning were quickly sold out, even though each pack cost as much as 1 gold galleon. Every time someone saw a golden light on the floating card, there would be an excited exclamation, "Wow! Legend!" It always attracts the attention of countless classmates, and students who open legendary cards will also feel proud. So, no matter from which perspective, this is the most wonderful week since the founding of Hogwarts. Professors are relieved of stress, classmates are promoted, and there are new entertainment activities in their free time. There is a bright future for everyone and everything is moving forward. Is that your explanation, Mr. Hohenzollern? After listening to this guy's summary of the past week, Dumbledore felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. He deliberately worked overtime on the weekend today and called this guy to the principal's office. In name, I'm inviting the other party to afternoon tea, but in reality, I just want to educate the other party. I originally wanted to let this kid realize his mistakes and engage in self-criticism, but what happened was what I heard from him. Not only should I not punish him, I should reward him. Carol, who was sitting across from the dining table, just looked indifferent. He knew, of course, that he was suddenly called to the principal's office. It definitely wasn't just for afternoon tea. After all, he had treated Professor Quirrell so badly. It would be unrealistic for Mr. Deng, as the principal, not to come out and say a few words, but he certainly can't admit that he is wrong. This is related to his principles. What is the first priority of a villain? It's not about great strength, extremely clever strategies, or ruthless means. Instead, you must stick to what you do and make sure it is right. You must stick to your beliefs more than anyone else. Otherwise, a few words from others can cause you to lose your intelligence at best, or even commit suicide, or explode on the spot at worst. It's scary to think about it. Dumbledore, on the other side, saw that the boy was reckless and had an expression as if to say, "I'm not wrong, what can you do to me?" She also changed her usual gentle attitude towards other children and spoke angrily. No matter how you try to explain it, what you did in the defense against the dark arts class was inappropriate anyway, and the subsequent damage done to Professor Quirrell was, yes, a bit too cruel. When he said the last word, he actually thought about it for a long time, and finally had to use the word cruel to describe it. Because after that day, the matter quickly spread throughout the school. But almost everyone, except the freshmen of Gryffindor and Hufflepuff who witnessed the scene. The first reaction of everyone who heard about this was that it was impossible, and the reason was very simple. It is because this kid is a Hufflepuff. And this house plays a role in the British wizarding world. It's simply a golden signboard. Whenever people mention them, their first reaction may be that they are a bit stupid, slow to react, and their academic performance is average. But if you tell him that they are sneaky, cheating, and even bad enough to play a prank on the professor, 9 out of 10 people will spit at you. Plus, this kid is also a freshman, and other senior students don't know much about him. So many people rush to the scene to check the situation after hearing about this incident. After being overwhelmed by the foul smell, I couldn't help but want to see Professor Quirrell who caused all this. So within a few days, the school's infirmary was visited by a constant stream of students, so much so that Madame Pomfrey, who was in charge of the infirmary, wanted to prevent these students from disturbing other patients. Professor Quirrell, who was completely autistic, was left alone in the corridor of the infirmary. Just like that, the poor guy lay on the hospital bed, like an exhibit, constantly visited by students coming and going. I also have to be pointed at and criticized, and have to listen to them repeat over and over again about my outstanding performance in that class, so much so that yesterday, as the principal, when I went to visit him with the intention of comforting him, Professor Quirrell's eyes were swollen like walnuts. If he continued crying like that, he would probably go blind soon. It was precisely because of this that Dumbledore specifically called Karl to the principal's office today. He hoped that the other party would go and apologize to Professor Quirrell. After all, if this continued, he was really afraid that the guy would not be able to bear the blow. One of them was so depressed that he jumped off the building and committed suicide. So Dumbledore could continue speaking frankly. Professor Quirrell is also responsible for this matter, but your problem is obviously bigger, and there is also that vulgar spell. It must not be spread out. I don't want the whole school to stink. Karl certainly had no objection to this request, but his principle in life was that he got what he paid for in the end. You have to get corresponding rewards from the other party. So he nodded. No problem, principal. I can agree to your request, but you also know that children have limited self-control. Although I'm a few years older than the average freshman, I'm still just a novice in terms of magical knowledge, so there is no way to fully guarantee the scope of application of the spell and the possibility of it spreading. I can always foresee some unforeseen accidents. What a set of long and difficult sentences about the British civil service system almost made Dumbledore's old brain smoke. He looked at the other party in confusion. What is a foreseeable and unforeseen accident? Karl spread his hands. If it's foreseeable, then it can't be called an unforeseeable accident. Unforeseen accidents. If I could have foreseen it, I wouldn't have said, stop, stop, stop. Dumbledore hurriedly called for a stop. He felt like his brain was about to burn out. After thinking hard again, he looked at Cole with resentful eyes. Tell me what you want. What can I give you so that you can apologize to Professor Quirrell as soon as possible? Seeing that old deng finally got to the point, Karl stopped making things difficult for him and took out a piece of parchment and handed it to him. This is an exclusive license agreement for the Hearthstone magic card game to be sold at Hogwarts, and the specific share ratio between me and the school. Please sign it, and I will go to the infirmary immediately and sincerely apologize to Professor Quirrell. Don't worry, this contract is fair and just. There are no hidden traps. My principle is that we all make money together. I'm for why would I let the school watch? Chapter 52. No one can be left behind in the process of progress. No one can be left behind. Dumbledore looked at the parchment contract in his hand and listened to what Karl said. His brain, which had finally resumed functioning, became a little dull again. He raised his glasses and read the contract carefully. Then he put it aside, looked at Karl dimly and asked, "Are you trying to bribe me? Mr. Hohenzollern, I have seen your card game. It is very interesting and valuable, but I don't understand. With such a profitable business, why would you give part of it to the school? Do you really love this school so much? You're too kind, principal." Karl did not intend to hide anything from old Deng's question. It's more of a bribe than a buy-off. I certainly understand that my card game is not good for the British wizarding community. What on earth does it mean? And it can't be limited to Hogwarts School. In the future, I will definitely promote it to the entire magical world. In this process, I need a backer. Karl was telling the truth, which came from his experience gained from working hard in New York over the years. There's an old New York saying that if you open a restaurant in New York, you won't feel at ease unless the block council members and gang bosses come to your place. to make a few $0 purchases. A 3-year-old child carries a gold brick in the busy market, and everyone in the world is a devil. Point next to the smiling Maitreya stands Vajra, and all the believers are saints. Although he had some influence in the Muggle world, he had only a few acquaintances in the British wizarding world. Point I can say that I have no basis for this. There are so many money-making projects in the future, but I will fail if I don't find a suitable partner. How could he possibly survive? As for the strongest figure in the British wizarding world, it is undoubtedly the old deng in front of him. Point therefore, I have to drag the other party into this no matter what, especially since the other party has already signed the contract. Point they have a legitimate reason to empty the wallets of all students and make them overspend because they are addicted to it. Point when facing the doubts from their parents. It also provides a good shield, which is killing two birds with one stone. Point as for the profits that are distributed, a real businessman will always only make limited profits, and huge profits can never last long. Point however, he also noticed Dumbledore's dilemma, so he tried to comfort him. Is there any need to bother you so much, Principal? My intention is good. The students now have a new entertainment project, so it's a great enrichment for their after-school life, and it's not just for me. If this proposal is used properly, it will be of great help in improving students' enthusiasm for learning. What? Dumbledore once again expressed that he didn't understand. Since the other party released this magic card game. Point it had only been less than 5 days, and Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick had already reported to me many times. It is said that many Gryffindor and Ravenclaw students are too addicted to this game to the point that they do not get enough rest and have no energy. In class some of them even did not have time to finish their homework. And some suggested that the subsequent release of this game should be strictly prohibited. Point as a result, this guy said that this thing can improve students' enthusiasm for learning, which is really incredible. Point Carol also felt this and quickly explained, don't doubt it. I can customize a batch of extremely rare cards with unique borders and give them to the professors. Let them be a reward for outstanding students. I guess it's more like adding or subtracting college points. It may be more attractive to students, especially those with average or lower grades. While speaking, Carol's expression remained smiling, but his tone was not so gentle. It is undeniable that schools lack the means to motivate students with average or lower grades. It's more about letting them run wild. Or to put it another way, in any school, teachers prefer those students who have good academic performance and pay attention to those who are naughty and mischievous. There is a lack of love and attention for students who are neither good nor bad. At this point, Karl began to shake his head and sighed. If there weren't so few students, I think there are many professors whose names I wouldn't even be able to remember. They are just like a bunch of unnecessary things, forgotten in a corner. It's really sad to think about it, but I don't plan to give up on them. I'm always so kind, because in my plan, no one can be left behind. No one who makes money will be left out. This statement is well reasoned and supported by facts. It can be described as a perfect sermon and lie. Point even Dumbledore had to admit that he was indeed persuaded by Karl and felt guilty in his heart. Point that's right. In addition to those outstanding students, the student he remembered most was actually that mysterious man. Point other lovely children were gradually forgotten over the long years. A feeling of guilt surged into the old man's heart. He wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes, looked into his eyes and said sincerely, I didn't expect that you were thinking this way in your heart. You are a kind child. I shouldn't have doubted you all the time. Okay, I agree to this, but you must also keep your promise, Mr. Hohenzollern. After saying this, Dumbledore signed the contract neatly. Point Karl's expression changed immediately. He stood up, took the contract, and checked it carefully to make sure it was correct. Point he stretched out his right hand and said with a smile, you will never regret your decision today. The history of Hogwarts will begin a new chapter from today. As he spoke, he picked up the cockroach candy that had been prepared on the side and shook it in front of Dumbledore. Point said in a cute and naughty manner, in fact, there is no need for you to call me here, Principal. Look, this is the gift I picked out a long time ago. Sweet candy can always comfort the hurt people. How could I not apologize to the professor? I've been prepared for this, but thank you for your concern. After Saying this, Karl walked out of the principal's office with a brisk pace, holding the jar of candy. Dumbledore, who had been watching his back, was in a very good mood at the moment, but at the same time he felt a little ashamed. I shouldn't doubt this kid. After all, how could a young man who could choose such discerning candy have an evil heart? He has such good taste. I was just a little too sensitive before. It seems that I must change my attitude towards Karl. But what he didn't know was that when he was about to finish his overtime work and go to have a good taste of the pile of cockroaches, Carol ran through the corridor outside the principal's office at a rapid speed and came to a hidden corner. Cedric, who was hiding in the dark, came out in a hurry and asked impatiently, as soon as they met, "How's it going? Did it work? I heard that Professor McGonagall is planning to confiscate the chessboards of many Gryffindor students. If we continue like this, we will be finished soon, not to mention the follow-up plans." In response, Karl chuckled disdainfully, took out the parchment from his ring, and handed it to the other party. His expression also turned grim. He pinched Cedric's chin, lifted his head up, and said to him, while looking at him face to face, "We have obtained the license, and will start the next plan immediately according to the contract, which has the principal's signature. We can hire all the house elves in the school free of charge. Start production at full capacity immediately. You are not allowed to have any mercy. In my plan, I will not let go of even a coppersicle from any of my classmates." Chapter 53, Professor Quirrell and -039, S fame in history. Cedric felt a little unhappy after hearing this. Yes, he had suggested before that Karl should set the price of each card pack. Lower the price a bit. 1 gold galleon per pack is really too expensive. After all, they are all classmates, so there is no need to do that. But the other party scolded him, saying that he was too soft-hearted, and finally he insisted on his own opinion. He thought that such a high price might affect the initial release of the game, but he didn't expect this. The first 1000 card packs were sold out in just 2 days. This made Cedric very frustrated. After all this time, he was the only poor person in the whole school. Even many of my classmates in the college who usually eat my snacks would buy 10 packs at a time. It was he who felt his worldview collapsed, and his guilt was reduced by 50% at that moment. As sales gradually progressed, according to the previous agreement between him and Karl, more and more gold galleons went into his pocket. The charm of money made the remaining 50% completely disappear last night. Having completed the moral cycle, Cedric certainly didn't need Karl's persuasion at this time. He immediately turned his face away and broke free from the other party's hand. He looked at the other person and promised seriously, "What are you talking about, boss? Now no one can stop me from giving everything for your cause. I will try my best and see how I perform." Having said that, he prepared to leave and start his business. Such professional actions made Karl very satisfied. He also held his cockroach pile of candy and prepared to go to the infirmary. As a result, Cedric, who was about to leave before he had taken a few steps, saw the candy jar in Karl's hand. Asked somewhat curiously, "Where are you going? What is that disgusting thing in a can? Maybe someone would like to eat this. You have really bad taste." In the principal's office, the old bee who was tasting a pile of cockroaches yawned when he was accidentally slandered. Cole was very happy, holding up the candy in his hand, and said with great satisfaction, "It seems that you think highly of the gift I chose. Don't doubt your ears. I'm going to apologize to Professor Quirrell. Do you think I'm noble and admire me? What a noble bullshit." Cedric felt terrible. He looked at Karl, feeling very conflicted. The last bit of conscience still drove him to speak. "You should let him go. Professor Quirrell has suffered enough. You don't have to do this." "What are you talking about?" Faced with the other party's questioning, Karl jumped up immediately. "Didn't you understand? I said an apology. This is my gift to Professor Quirrell. How can you say that? I will play a prank on him again next time. You can't use such vicious thoughts to speculate on my pure heart. My apology is sincere and I will always honor any promises and deals I make." After saying this, Karl, who was hurt, turned around and left. Cedric was left alone, shaking his head. He had already begun to sympathize with Professor Quirrell. What an unlucky guy. As for what Carol said, he didn't believe a word of it, because he knew very well that, if it was a real apology, you shouldn't put a few real cockroaches among a pile of cockroaches and candles in the infirmary corridor. As time passed, there were fewer and fewer students visiting Professor Quirrell. A pale hospital bed was placed in the corner of the corridor, perfectly shielded from all sunlight. Professor Quirrell, wearing a clean white hospital gown, hugged his legs with his hands, buried his head deeply in his knees, and curled up into a ball. Hiding in a dark corner. If you didn't know him, you would think he was being invaded by a giant monster. Finally, in the dim corridor, a golden light dispelled the gloomy atmosphere around. An angel descended to the earth, and Karl faced the sunshine. Holding his apology gift with a bright smile. He walked towards Professor Quirrell, and as soon as he got close, he immediately smiled warmly. He was very familiar with the other person. He sat down next to the other person's bed, and handed over the cockroach candy in his hand. Professor Quirrell, I'm here to see you. I'm extremely sorry for what happened to you. I hope you can forgive me. These extremely gentle words to Cornelius' ears sounded like the howling of a ghost from hell. The curled up body began to tremble constantly, and the head buried in the knees seemed never to dare to lift up. Using only his hands, he tried desperately to move his body away from Karl. Seeing this, Karl felt very sad. He grabbed Professor Ock's shoulders and made him unable to move. He said, pretending to be sad, "It seems that you are still unwilling to forgive me, but you have to admit that during that duel, you were the first to make all the requests, whether it was asking me to take action first or to remain silent and not defend myself. All of this is what you asked for. I didn't mean to force you at all." This so-called apology, but in fact a secondary insult, finally made Professor Quirrell unable to bear it any longer, and he buried his head in his knees. Finally, she raised her head, with a pair of eyes as red and swollen as a goldfish, staring at Karl and crying loudly, "You devil, you have an extremely evil heart. You have been tempting me with words all along. This is all your trap. You will definitely go to hell. You will definitely go to hell." This hoarse cry made Karl's hair stand on end. One of them had red and swollen eyes, hadn't eaten for several days, had a pale face, and emitted a foul odor all over his body. Like a zombie-like humanoid creature crying out to you. The uncanny valley effect would be stretched to the extreme. Karl quickly turned his eyes away from the other person, not because he felt guilty, but he looked into the other person's eyes. But the shape is really a bit scary. Professor Quirrell, feeling insulted once again, was extremely angry and gasped for breath. Seeing that the other person was about to die on the spot from a stroke due to excessive anger, Karl didn't dare to tease him anymore. He first placed the can of cockroaches next to Professor Quirrell's pillow, and then took out one from his ring. He took out a letter, then changed his expression, pretending to be happy for the other person, and spoke loudly, "I know you won't forgive me, Professor, so I did those things for you to restore your image in everyone's eyes." This is a reply from St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries. "I have written a detailed report on the magic I used on you. I sent it to them. After their research, they found that this magic has a surprisingly good effect in treating constipation." As soon as these words came out, Professor Quirrell immediately felt something was wrong. He quickly sat up straight and looked at Karl with lingering fear. Karl smiled slightly. He was very happy about what he had done to help himself complete the system task in the past 5 days. The professor who contributed a full 10,000 points to him was grateful to the person who suffered so much for him. Of course I have to make a choice and never let him go. Whether now or in the future, the other party must continue, even if Professor Quirrell may have disappeared in the end. He also needs to continue to earn points for himself in hell. So under Professor Quirrell's horrified gaze, Karl spoke slowly and gently. "So, they are preparing to officially release a report tomorrow, announcing the birth of a new healing spell. As the only person to have physically experimented with this spell, in order to thank you for your selfless dedication, they will be included in the published article. Write your name on it in bold and vivid colors. As this article develops, any constipated patient in the wizarding world will be affected when you receive treatment. Thank you for your efforts. Your name and this event will be remembered forever in the wizarding world. You have already gone down in history. Chapter 54. Happy Professor Quirrell and Capitalist Karl. What? A loud scream, like thousands of troops, rushed out of the corridor of the infirmary and finally flew into the sky. The glass in the entire corridor began to tremble. Because of the scream, Karl could vouch that he had never seen anyone so pale. At this moment, Professor Quirrell's face was completely pale, and even the pupils in his eye sockets were a little dilated. If it weren't for the pillow behind him, Karl felt that he might have seen Professor Quirrell let out a long roar. He vomited 3 liters of blood and fell to the ground and died. But now, this guy seemed to still have a glimmer of hope. Even though he was trembling all over, it felt like all the bones in my body were sucked out, and I couldn't even use a single muscle strength. Still trembling, he clamped the letter between his legs, tore the envelope open with his teeth, and struggled to lie on the bed for a long time. Finally, he unfolded the letter in front of him and began to read it carefully. Ha 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 ha. As I read deeper, bursts of strange laughter came out of Professor Quirrell's mouth. The laughter was mournful and sad, making people's hair stand on end. Karl was a little afraid to say another word to the other party. He was afraid that, if he wasn't careful, the other party would suddenly bite him, or that the other party would be too happy and die in front of him. He couldn't explain it clearly, so he didn't even give a reason and just simply said, "Hello, enjoy, Your Honor. No need to thank me. I'm leaving now." Killing people by destroying their hearts is his usual trick. Professor Quirrell was about to explode. He started by laughing wildly. Then he turned his face to the wall and kept whispering there, as if there was a conversation between two people in his mind. Finally, when Karl's figure disappeared in the corridor, Professor Quirrell suddenly jumped up and picked up the jar of cockroaches in front of him. He wanted to smash it to pieces, but when he raised the glass jar above his head, he suddenly put it down, so he kept muttering, "No, no, no. This guy is the one who apologized to me. That's right, I'm the victim. Why should I be angry? Why should I be angry? He gave in to me, didn't he? He took the initiative to come to me and apologize. He took the initiative to bow his head, didn't he? I won. I won." As he spoke, Professor Quirrell looked at his fruits of victory and unscrewed the lid of the candy jar. In a rather casual manner, he grabbed a handful and stuffed them into his mouth. The crawling cockroaches made black chocolate syrup splash everywhere as he chewed them. Until a white liquid with a strange smell splashed out from one of the candies. Professor Quirrell stopped chewing and wiped the white liquid from the corner of his mouth with his trembling right hand. The sense of touch had already given him clear feedback, but he still didn't give up and put the thing to his nose and smelled it. After confirming again and again, Professor Quirrell sat alone on the edge of the bed with a dull face, looking out the window, muttering to himself, "It's fake. It's all fake. I must be having a nightmare. Yes, I must be having a nightmare." Karl, who had already arrived at the square, listened to the silver bell-like laughter coming from the building behind him. He was very satisfied with this, and of course, what made him even more satisfied was the voice of the dog system that kept ringing in his mind. Successfully caused a professor to have a mental breakdown, and the points increased by 1000. If the breakdown continues, the points will increase by 1000. The opponent has become completely mentally abnormal, and the points are increased by 5000. Along with these sounds, Karl felt that today's sunshine was particularly warm, and his steps seemed particularly clear from time to time. I would do an impromptu dance following the rhythm of the voices in my head. Walking all the way to the Hufflepuff common room, Karl gave the brightest and warmest smile to everyone he met along the way. Then he bewitched the group of little male and female wizards. And under everyone's gaze, he rushed into the kitchen. Cole took out the parchment signed by Dumbledore, looked at the house elves, and announced loudly, "Well, everyone, I have found a new job for you. You will no longer have to worry about lack of opportunities to serve wizards. Don't feel frustrated. You will have endless work to do next." These words, which sounded inhumane to the working people, caused loud cheers. The house elves, dressed in tattered clothes, put down their work, gathered around Karl, and danced with joy. Karl, who was enjoying the cheers, waved his hand and signaled everyone to be quiet. Then, under the gazes of many house elves, he took out a very cheap metal badge. After waving it in front of their eyes, he said with a smile, "In the next period of time, whoever does the best job will do the most work. I will grant him a medal, and he can upgrade once for every 10 medals. At the end of each month, the portrait of the house elf with the highest ranking medal will be hung above the kitchen to show that it is the most useful house elf to wizards." These words immediately caused a huge sensation, and the house elves jumped wildly. Those big eyes stared at the cheap medal in Carol's hand, as if it was the most precious treasure between heaven and earth. Cole was very satisfied with this. It seemed that he had not forgotten his skills as a boss, and his application of them was becoming more and more outstanding. What? You said house elves don't need rewards, they will work hard. What are you talking about? There is a difference between working hard and working desperately. There is a difference between making people do the work of beasts of burden and treating them as beasts of burden. What's more, cattle and horses will rest, but these house elves are completely tireless. As a capitalist and exploiter, Carol has always had a great talent and a very flexible moral bottom line in this regard. After he finished his plan, the house elves immediately started producing Hearthstone cards. Since house elves have a natural talent for magic, they only need a little teaching. In this way, a perfect nuclear-powered cattle and horse production line was born. Looking at his employees who were busy with happy smiles, Karl felt relieved and prepared to return to the dormitory. Have a good rest and enjoy the sense of superiority brought by your own morality. But as soon as he turned around, he saw an angry little face. Miss Beaver's face was red as she looked at Karl. At the same time, he also looked at the house elf who was busy behind Karl. Finally, his chest kept rising and falling as he roared loudly, "How could you do this? You lied to me again, you disgusting liar. You've been lying from the beginning. You never pay attention to the working conditions of these poor guys. You just want to exploit them. You really are such a disappointment." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 55, The Real World. Okay, don't be angry first. Let's sit down and talk carefully, seriously, and professionally about everything you just saw. In a remote corner of the Hufflepuff common room, Karl and Hermione found an empty seat and sat down. Karl gentlemanly poured a glass of pumpkin juice for the other person, then sat quietly in front of the table, clasped his hands together and spoke, "Before we start communicating, please repeat your accusation against me." Hermione was almost mad at this moment. She first drank some pumpkin juice to moisten her throat, and then immediately spoke angrily. "How could you do this? Those poor house elves are already in a miserable situation. You actually want him to exploit them like this? Isn't this slavery? This is a matter of principle, Mr. Carroll, and your deception. On the one hand, you said you wanted to fight for the labor rights of Professor Binns, but on the other hand, you did this. You really," Hermione couldn't go on. She hadn't been so angry in a long time. She had never thought about it before. It is unbelievable that someone among my friends could do such a thing. Slavery should have disappeared from history long ago. Why does he still exist in this world? And with such double standards, doesn't that make him a complete liar? Carol looked at the other person, first shook his head slightly, and finally smiled disdainfully. To be honest, if I wasn't in Hogwarts, if it weren't for the other person's current identity, he would be my classmate. He had a strong premonition that he and Hermione would become strangers, or even enemies in the end. In his eyes, this girl has many advantages. She is smart, professional, has a strong learning ability, and her logical reasoning and thinking skills are top-notch. But at the same time, there are also countless shortcomings, such as the naivety of European left-wing intellectuals, their overly strong sense of morality, and their elementary understanding of things. These are impurities that need to be corrected urgently, or must be removed. So Karl prepared to take action. Starting with morality and innocence point, he asked, sitting up straight and looking at Hermione seriously. Before I start my defense, let me first ask you a question. What is the purpose of any intelligent creature participating in social labor? Hearing this, Hermione was stunned for a moment, but quickly answered, to receive wages for labor and the means of subsistence. Such a beautiful answer made Karl nod his head involuntarily. He was indeed the smartest brain in Hogwarts. The knowledge is broad, but this is not enough, he said dimly. That's a pretty standard answer, Miss Granger, but there are some flaws, one of which is very important. That is the social respect and status that he can obtain in the social group he belongs to. After Karl finished speaking, Hermione instinctively wanted to refute it, because it was completely different from what was in the book point. But Carol interrupted her and said forcefully, what I'm going to say next may make you feel uncomfortable, but please listen carefully with the heart of learning, because this is the truth of this world. Anyone who participates in it never demands compensation that matches the value of his labor. It can even be said that in this world, the value of the labor produced by the vast majority of people does not reach them. As he spoke, Karl began to give an example. He used optical magic to create a floating globe in the air, then he marked all of sub-Saharan Africa with red light, and then said, this is the poorest place on earth, with per capita disposable income less than $100 a year. You can find a guide there to take you through the most dangerous desert, and the required salary is only $1,000. In contrast, the salary for a professional tour guide in Europe is never less than $4. The difference is 400 times. The value of the service provided is the same, just because one person was born in Europe and the other was born in Africa. Having said that, Karl didn't give Hermione any chance to refute, and began to turn the globe to Asia. This is Asia, the world's factory and labor-intensive industry cluster. Every piece of clothing you wear in the Muggle world, most of it is made by people here, but you have to understand that each shirt costs about £6. People here get less than half a pound out of it at best, and the workers who make the clothing, the salary they receive, is only about one of the price of this dress. Hermione's worldview was shattered. She had never learned such knowledge in school. She always thought that all children were like her, and all parents in the world were like his parents, have a decent job and a happy family. The girl instinctively realized that what Carol was going to say next would be much crueler than what he had just said. Sure enough, Karl did not stop telling the story, and the rotating globe pointed to Latin America. The tone became increasingly cruel. This is Latin America. In the minds of Europeans, it has the mysterious Mayan civilization, Mexican peppers and the carnival of the dead, tropical beaches and rainforests, but what they don't know is that there are countless wars and rampant drugs here, and they won't tell you, even if it's these criminal projects, such as the drug trade, represented by the CIA. It also accounts for 90% of the profits. The world will not let go of even the wealth of crime, not to mention that it is filled with other things, such as arms smuggling, human trafficking, organ smuggling, $1 for one sexual service, etc. Say, no more, no more. Hermione covered her ears and shook her head desperately, as if Karl's plain narration was like the whispers of the devil. It almost drove her crazy, but after a brief thought, she seemed to still want to protect her world, which was about to be broken. He said loudly with all his strength, then, why do they have to do this? Crime is wrong, and can't this world be fair? Why does it have to be like this? When the girl spoke, tears were already hanging in the corners of her eyes, but Carol did not show any sign of softening his heart. He really had no intention of telling the girl in front of him the truth about the world so early. I thought about staying with him and playing role-playing games for a while longer, but let this castle continue to serve as a wonderful utopia. But life is always more exciting than novels, and sometimes we always encounter unexpected things. Now that it has come to this, he has no intention of stopping. It is also a good opportunity to test this smart girl. Are you qualified to move towards the future you have planned? After all, you are in your own team. We don't need cowards who don't even have the courage to face the real world. So Karl suddenly burst into laughter, as if what Hermione had just said was the funniest joke in the world. Until the sadness on the girl's face was gradually replaced by anger. Karl suddenly stood up, opened his arms, and looked at Hermione and said, because no one will tell you that the only way Mexican farmers grow marijuana and poppies is to grow them. It is because of the cheap agricultural products from the United States that it is impossible for them to survive normally through their own labor. Has anyone ever told you that the poverty in sub-Saharan Africa is due to Europe's plundering of its resources and debt trap? Even the collapse of the colonial system was never a sign of progress, but was simply the result of keeping the sheep in one's own fold. It is too costly to produce wool and mutton. It is better to release them back into nature, which is cheaper and more profitable. Having said this, Cole paused, turned his head slowly, and looked down at the girl's frightened face. Said with a smile, no one has ever told you that the reason you can grow up without worries is that you maintain your innocence and kindness. It's not because of anything else, but simply because you were born into a middle-class family in the UK. That's all. Chapter 56. Controlling Hermione. The 3 sentences no one told you were like 3 nuclear bombs, destroying the worldview that Hermione had shaped over the past 11 years. It was completely shattered. As far as she could remember, both her teachers and parents had talked to her about it. The world is a beautiful place. Although some people are still poor, that is only because there is something wrong with their system. If only they could become a democratic country like Britain, everything would be fine. But now, according to Karl's narration, the world is almost ruined, and there is unfair exploitation and oppression everywhere. Even he himself seems to have become a perpetrator. In Carol's context, this is why Europeans can live in paradise. It is at the expense of the people of Latin American and African countries who are living in hell. Hermione fell into unprecedented self-doubt, and complex expressions continued to appear on the girl's face. Karl sat on a chair beside him, crossed his legs, and waited quietly. He knew that Hermione was currently reconstructing her own world, and that he should just wait quietly. Don't disturb each other. Just watch a seed quietly taking root and sprouting in a virgin soil. Whether this seed can survive determines the friendship between him and this girl. Should it end tonight, or can it continue? In the midst of an intense brainstorm, Hermione wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes with both hands, suddenly raised her head, and looked at Karl and asked, what about you? What do you want to do? If this world is really as hopeless as you say, shouldn't we do something? Can we just watch this happen? Perfect answer, Miss Granger. Karl smiled, and this time the smile was very real. He looked at the girl quietly, as if he was admiring a peerless painting. Different from all the expressions Karl had shown in front of Hermione before. This time there was a real appreciation in his eyes. A true warrior dares to face the bleak life, and also dares to face this fucked up world. Hermione is indeed a Gryffindor, with a fire buried deep inside, willing to make a difference in the world. So Karl said approvingly, French philosopher Romain Rolland once said that there is only one true heroism in the world, that is to recognize the truth of life and still love it. But I also want to make a little addition. There is another kind of heroism, which is when you discover that this world is so hopeless that it is suffocating, still have the courage to change it. As he spoke, Karl's emotions gradually became more intense, and he began to open up to someone, something that was very rare. You are very brave, Miss Granger. You are not afraid of changes in your life. You have the heart of a warrior. To tell you the truth, I have no intention of making any improvements or perfection to this world. What I have to do is to lead this world into chaos and complete collapse. Don't doubt it, I'm not crazy, because only when a fire like this sets the whole world on fire will the tall trees be burned. Only newly grown grass has a chance to see the Sunday. To be honest, the dog system was not wrong about Karl. He was indeed a born villain, and even he himself thought so. But unlike the dog system's pursuit, He does not want to rule the magical world, nor does he want to be like that noseless psychopath. The biggest goal in my entire life is just to get into a middle school. What he wants to do is to bring the entire world to the brink of chaos and collapse, no matter how many innocent people will die. No matter how many tragic things would happen. Because he knew very well that any drastic change would bring disaster. The process is always painful. Compromise and concession can never cleanse the world completely. A single spark can start a prairie fire, but what he had to do was not to sow the fire, but to pour a bucket of gasoline on it. Hermione was so shocked that she couldn't say a word. She looked at Cole with dull eyes. There was a boy in front of me, so handsome that he didn't look like a human, with such brilliant golden hair. The blue eyes are clearer and brighter than the water of the Caribbean Sea. But tonight, every word that came out of his mouth made her feel scared. She had never been so afraid of anything before. That feeling of fear emanates from the depths of the soul. Hermione kept digesting every word Karl said, but in the end, she could only speak with a hint of apology. Forgive me, Karl. I really don't understand what you want to say, but thank you for talking to me so much. I'm a little tired. Can you please let me go back and rest first? Of course, you can think about it slowly and even judge whether you are willing to be friends with me based on my future behavior. Karl was very understanding and not aggressive at all. He simply took out a thick stack of hundreds of pages of paper from his ring and handed it to Hermione. Hermione looked at the paper handed to her, confused. What is this? I'm not in the mood to read any books right now. Faced with the girl's rejection, Carol just smiled faintly and said half jokingly, "Isn't this what you asked for? A plan and report on fighting for Professor Binns' labor rights? This is what I concluded after reading all the laws related to labor in the wizarding world. Materials regarding the lawsuit filed against Hogwarts for illegal labor exploitation." These words brought a little warmth back to Hermione's broken heart. She took the materials from the other party and briefly flipped through them. Looking at Karl, he said apologetically, "I didn't expect that you would actually complete what you promised me. I called you a liar before. I apologize to you. No need to apologize." Karl waved his hands quickly with a joking expression. "I will always fulfill every promise I make, especially to beautiful girls." Hearing this, Hermione's pale face couldn't help but turn red again, and she looked at Karl. It also changed from the previous fear to something complicated. This guy said those scary words before, as if he was a demon from a movie. Now he can seamlessly transform into another face and say such embarrassing words. What a liar, and a really helpless liar. Hermione felt a little helpless, but this helplessness was soon transformed into anger by the strong competitive spirit in her heart. She began to carefully examine the paper in her hand, and soon she seemed to have found something. Looking at Carol, he said with some pride, "The content here is too concise. I don't think this will work. It seems you still need some help. It's better to be a smart one." Speaking of this, Hermione seemed somewhat smug, as if she really hoped to learn something from the young man in front of her who made her helpless, seeing a hint of panic or even a hint of pleading in the tone. But Hermione had obviously made a wrong judgment again. Cole was waiting for the other party to ask this question, and he immediately pretended. "Didn't you see the expression?" he asked in confusion. "Oh, clever Miss Granger, you can be careless sometimes. Please take a closer look." "I saw that material, but it was just a catalog. There was too much real material, so I didn't give it to you right away. I have all the content ready, which is about 189,600 pages in total." Chapter 57. Entering the PRINCIPALN-039's office for the second time. A week had passed since that night when he had taken Hermione to task. This week was the quietest week Karl had experienced since he entered Hogwarts. The energetic girl never bothered him again and took the initiative to ask to join his team. He acted as the accountant for the entire team and started working for himself. But in Hermione's own words, "I'm definitely not giving in to you. It's just because I need money now. I want to buy more books. Then read it carefully. I will definitely be able to find evidence to refute what you said to me before. I must prove that this world is not what you said it is. There must be a way to make this world a better place. Karl expressed his happiness at this rebellious behavior, as he already had many blind followers. This kind of outstanding talent who likes to learn and think independently is what he needs now. So he offered Hermione a very high salary, 2% of the total revenue. This made Cedric very unconvinced. He felt that he was not valued, so he was in a bad mood for a few days. However, when he saw Miss Beaver's abnormal learning ability and after seeing the extremely professional accounting skills, I could only express my admiration. After all, not everyone can make a daily net profit of thousands of galleons from gaming revenue. The daily profit is less than 50 gold galleons, and there is even the possibility of losses. So today, when Cole took the initiative to come to the headmaster's office for the first time to report to Dumbledore about this week. Hearthstone, the magic card game, is on sale at Hogwarts. Dumbledore was completely shocked. He even thought that his eyes were blurry. After checking it carefully many times, looking at Carol, who was sitting opposite him, crossing his legs and looking contented, he asked with an incredible look on his face, "You mean, in this week, your game that was extremely popular, with each pack of cards selling for up to 1 galleon, I only made 60 gold galleons in a week, and if we take into account the special cards prepared for the teacher, the cost will be recalculated. You've lost 400 gold galleons. According to the 200 split principle, the school will give you kilograms of gold galleons. Is that what you mean?" Dumbledore is in a bad state. He is old, but he doesn't have Alzheimer's. How could he possibly believe such an account? But Carol on the side argued convincingly, "What are you talking about? Would I lie to you? Principal, how can you be so untrusting of others? I have complete and detailed accounts here, and they are available for inspection at any time. Anyone can be asked to investigate." As he spoke, Carol changed his expression to one of caring for others and sighed deeply. "There's no need to pay for anything like that. After all, my main purpose in making this game is to benefit my family. It's semi-charitable. If you pay too much attention to money, it's a bit unnecessary, but even if it's my subsidy to the school, you don't have to thank me too much. This is what I should do." Upon hearing this, the look of surprise in Dumbledore's eyes almost shattered the lenses of his glasses. He looked at the boy in front of him in disbelief, thinking, how could they be so alike? This kind of weak sense of morality, eloquence, and the feeling of manipulating others is so familiar. Karl on the side was also helpless. He also had his own unspeakable secrets. After all, the dog system calculation principles, the requirement is that every penny earned from classmates must go into your own pocket to count. This made him feel very embarrassed. It was not that he was a bad student, but there was a bad thing in his mind. Besides, his share was not much, only 95%, and the landlord had no surplus food. I can only endure the hardship in school and bear the blame myself. On the other side, in Dumbledore's mind, the almost forgotten memory was awakened again. Last time, Leodang was very unhappy, so the old man spoke in a rare sarcastic tone. "Thank you so much, Mr. Hohenzollern, for everything you have done for the school. You always surprise me. I wonder what brings you here today." Hearing this, Carol snapped his fingers and pretended to have just remembered it. He stood up and walked to the principal's desk, waved his hand gently, and saw a pile of bound papers. Suddenly, the entire principal's desk was piled with papers. He pointed at the papers, changed his expression again, and complained in an extremely disappointed tone, "President, I have always respected you and other professors very much, but some shameless things have happened in this school. It is really unbearable for me. My strong sense of morality and justice drives me to disregard the etiquette between teachers and students. I'm here to formally inform you that I have filed a lawsuit with the Ministry of Magic regarding Professor Bin's labor rights. This is our litigation material. I hope you can read every page carefully." What? The old face was full of question marks. Dumbledore looked as if he had seen a ghost. He first looked at Karl, who had a righteous face. He looked at the papers on his desk again. There were so many of them that they were enough to bury himself. My brain, which had just had a good rest this week, was unable to function again and remained silent for a long time. He asked with some disbelief, "You sure you are not talking nonsense, Mr. Hohenzollern?" Hogwarts has a history of thousands of years since its establishment. No student has ever taken the school as a whole to court. You really opened my eyes. What are you talking about? Karl still maintained his great and glorious image and refuted righteously. In the face of injustice, we must have the courage to fight back. Isn't this the purpose of Gryffindor House? Isn't this the courage you always talk about? You graduated from Gryffindor. Have you forgotten all this? You are from Hufflepuff House. What does Gryffindor's courage have to do with you? Dumbledore roared madly in his heart, but now he had to maintain the reputation of the school. If this really happened, and the students sued the school, Minerva would definitely force me not to eat sweets for a week. What a severe punishment it is. It's so scary to think about it. While we were getting along for 2 weeks, he could basically figure out that this kid must have a backup plan for doing this, and he would never let his affairs get out of control. So Dumbledore took a few deep breaths and tried hard to suppress the urge in his heart to fire Karl. She returned to her usual gentle attitude towards children and asked carefully, then, what suggestions do you have? There is so much material that I cannot possibly read it all at once. Please forgive me for the limited energy of an old man, so I hope that this matter can be resolved privately and efficiently. In other words, how can I satisfy you? Hearing this, Karl waved his hands repeatedly, and he had to speak righteously. What do you mean by satisfying me? This is to give an explanation to all the students. I'm just their representative. There is no personal grudge between us, and it certainly does not include the last time you suspected me for no reason and asked me to come to the principal's office. The one that damaged my reputation. Shift. He still holds a grudge, just like that guy. Chapter 58. Controlling the principal. Dumbledore was experienced in dealing with people like that guy. That is to avoid a head-on confrontation with the other party and try to find someone with a simple mind and easy to manipulate to do bad things in secret. A natural fool, naturally restrained from being treacherous. A certain magizologist on the other side of the ocean sneezed. But now, old Den could only sigh secretly as he seemed to have lost this opportunity. He could only look at Karl helplessly and said, I hope you can really do as you said and not pursue excessive power. The British wizarding world can no longer bear another Dark Lord. Karl was disdainful but also a little angry when he heard this. He looked dimly at the old man in front of him. The tone was no longer as calm and playful as usual, but rather serious and revealing a hint of disdain. Sure enough, from the moment I came into your sight, you and many of those idiots at the Ministry of Magic, you all subconsciously imagine me as the next generation of Voldemort. This is not only an insult to me, but also an exposure of your IQ. As he spoke, Karl stood up slowly and looked up and down at this luxurious principal's office. He seemed to be looking for something. He was looking for the audience. From the moment he stepped through the door, the portraits hiding somewhere were constantly scanned by the pair of sapphire eyes until all the portraits hiding in the corners were seen. Forcing everything back into his own frame, Karl said calmly, now that the audience is here, I will tell you about Voldemort, the man you have always feared. What do you think? My assessment is very simple. He is a person who lacks intelligence, has no sophistication, and is a complete pervert. What era is this now? It's so lowbrow to still engage in racism. It's disgusting to smell, but kind of funny to look at. Dumbledore was shocked again, and everyone, including the portraits hanging everywhere, looked surprised. Looking at Karl standing in the middle of the principal's office. These portraits were not chattering and arguing like before. He just looked at Karl silently, his eyes full of confusion and fear, wanting to escape from his own painting. Every time he saw those seemingly gentle blue eyes, he didn't dare to move at all. Dumbledore had nothing to say and could only silently change the subject. Looking at the pile of papers on the table, he sighed. Well, don't mention that name again. Come on, Mr. Hohenzollern, give us your proposal. I know you're ready. Yes, that's right. Cole was very satisfied with this. Old Den finally regarded himself as someone with whom he could have an equal dialogue point instead of treating yourself like a child as before, with a defensive and contemptuous attitude towards yourself. This change in mood made Karl very satisfied, and he walked quickly to the principal's desk. He simply swept the more than 10 pages of materials in front of him to the ground, then slowly took out a piece of paper and handed it to the other party. This is a summary of the lawsuit materials, a foolproof version. I think you should be able to understand it. Hearing this, Dumbledore was a little angry and glared at him, but said nothing. He continued to listen to the other party's next offer. Carol didn't have any intention of greeting and spoke directly. The conditions are very simple. Professor Binns' position as Professor of History of Magic must be replaced. I've picked the man for you, Gilderoy Lockhart. What? Dumbledore was a little confused. He thought the other party did so much because he wanted to stay in school. He arranged one of his own people to take up this position, but according to his understanding, Karl and Mr. Lockhart seemed to have no intersection. Carol also saw the confusion in the other person's eyes and said with disdain, "There's no need to do this. Do you really think I would be so stupid? I've done all this just to plant one of my own into Hogwarts, not to mention that I know nothing about the wizarding world. Even if there are so-called close friends, I can't possibly do something so obvious. Wouldn't that just hand the evidence to you?" When saying this, Karl had already completely assumed the role of the future Dark Lord that Dumbledore had arranged for him. The tone was sharp and sarcastic, which made Dumbledore very embarrassed, and he could only laugh it off. "You misunderstood. I never had such an idea, but as far as I know, this Mr. Lockhart, I have no real talent or knowledge. My only achievement is being a famous novelist. Is there something wrong in letting him take this position?" "No, no." Karl waved his finger in denial. "You are talking about the wrong principal, or your perspective is wrong. This Mr. Lockhart is indeed just a vase. How could he be chosen to be a professor at Hogwarts unless the selectors are blind? But this is also limited to the subject. If it is other important positions, defense against the dark arts, for example, is definitely not an option, but history of magic, and that's appropriate, so to speak. After all, it's history. The most important thing is the story. Mr. Lockhart's talent can be used in this. At least having a novelist tell the history lesson is better than having all the students lie down and sleep, unable to refute. This was Dumbledore's first feeling, and at the same time he felt that this kid had said such a long string of words it seemed like he was implying to himself, could he be that kind of person? How could he be so blind as to be that old, letting a person with no real talent or knowledge take on such an important position as Professor of Defense against the Dark Arts? You have to know that my vision in selecting professors for this course is very unique. But even so, Dumbledore still did not intend to give in, and tried to struggle again. But Karl didn't give him a chance, and continued to speak to himself. As for Professor Binns, I have made arrangements for him. He can serve as the honorary president of the Historical Research Association of the British Wizarding World, even if the association has not yet been established. I think with your reputation and ability, it should be easy to do. In this case, Professor Binns no longer has an employment relationship with Hogwarts, and this lawsuit will naturally not be effective. As he spoke, he pointed a finger and emphasized his tone. Of course, this can only be lifted after Hogwarts pays off Professor Binns' nearly 100-year-long salary. Considering that he has no chance to spend this reward, I suggest that this reward be used. The allocation is based on the number of students in each college, which reflects Professor Binns' selflessness and greatness. It also demonstrates the fairness and rigor of the school, killing two birds with one stone. Completely numb, Dumbledore was no longer complete and could not utter even a word. He really couldn't imagine that nearly half a century later, he could still be manipulated by someone to this extent. What made him even more unable to let go was that this guy had a complicated relationship with that guy. Compared to Dumbledore, who was completely numb, Karl felt unusually comfortable at this moment. He could imagine the praise he would receive when he told this news to other classmates. I'm indeed a good person who likes to seek benefits for my family. Chapter 59. Caring Karl. Looking at Karl, who had a serious face and was asking for his salary in a very firm manner. Dumbledore didn't want to say anything more, fearing to continue communicating with this little bastard. Maybe tomorrow he will have to mortgage his principal's office to the other party, and now he has serious doubts. Karl kept looking up and down his office just to visually assess the dimensions of the room. He wanted to customize the decoration in his own style, so he could only say it perfunctorily. Okay, Mr. Hohenzollern, I will seriously consider your proposal. Your proposal is very valuable. I will call all the professors to discuss it immediately and submit your proposal to the board of directors for review. But what you need to know is that Professor Binns has served at Hogwarts for a long time. Regarding the calculation of his salary, it's a very long and tedious process. Can you go back first? He used this delaying tactic because he was sure that Cole would not have time to sort out the amount of Professor Binns' labor remuneration. After all, the more than 100,000 pages of prosecution materials were already a huge drain on a kid of his age. He should have no time left to calculate the relevant content. But Karl had already predicted his prediction and was prepared because of the existence of the memory palace in his brain. He can be regarded as a walking supercomputer. He just closed his eyes slightly. In the memory palace in his mind, he quickly searched for information about Professor Binns and the salaries of professors at Hogwarts over the years, although that information was only obtained when he was reading about the labor remuneration laws in the British wizarding world. These were just some scraps of information accidentally stored in his mind, but even so, he was able to quickly find the relevant information in his mind. Then, under Dumbledore's shocked gaze, Karl casually took a piece of parchment and a quill. He began to calculate and write on it, and in less than 10 minutes, he had a detailed and complete salary calculation report. It has already been created by him. He handed over the report and said confidently, "There may be slight differences in the data, but the overall result will definitely not have an error of more than 1. If you don't believe it, you can go find a professional to calculate it after this incident. So, if it's okay, please pay the debt as soon as possible, or give it to me personally. If you are worried, you can ask the prefects of each grade in each college, as well as the president of the student union, to come and collect it together. It's over." Dumbledore was disheartened. He knew that the little bastard in front of him was sure that he didn't want to make the matter worse. For fear of causing a bad influence on the school, let alone asking other students to participate in this matter. Even Professor McGonagall didn't want him to know about this. Looking at the detailed and complete salary calculation sheet in front of him, Old Deng was completely speechless. "It's just a rogue statement. Thank you for your expertise, Mr. Hohenzollern, but I have to tell you that I cannot give you the money now. The reason is simple. Your school simply can't afford that much money. The total value of more than 100 years of salary is nearly 2 gold galleons. The school simply doesn't have that much cash to give you. This is almost a showdown. What can you do to me if I have no money? I'm so old now. Believe it or not, I'll lie at your feet now." It was obvious that Dumbledore wanted to blackmail Karl, but Cole was not in a hurry at all. He slowly took out a loan contract that he had prepared long ago. He placed it gently on the principal's desk, then sat down again, crossed his legs, stared at the other person, and said with a smile, as if it was a coincidence, "Don't you think this is a coincidence? It just so happens that I founded a foundation before entering school. The governor of your school, Mr. Malfoy, is one of the founding members of the foundation. Considering the school, we can't come up with so much cash at once, but it only applies to issues related to the school's reputation. As a student, I must consider my school, so please sign this agreement. I'll arrange it right away. The interest rate is very low, only 5% a year. Isn't that very considerate?" Hearing this, Dumbledore looked as uncomfortable as if he had eaten a few cockroaches among a pile of candies. Now he was sure that this little bastard would never become Voldemort, because Voldemort was not as bad as him. At least Tom never thought of squeezing so much money from his school. After thinking about it, Dumbledore, who was a little angry, pouted and snorted, "If I quit, what else can you do? Don't go too far, Mr. Hohenzollern. You have already touched my bottom line." Bottom line. Karl looked at the old man in front of him puzzledly. Then he stood up for the second time and began to wander around the principal's office. He pointed to the exquisite tea set beside him and said, "This should be worth 100 gold galleons." He pointed at the portraits around him and said, "These things are useless, but there should be people willing to buy them. I'll give you 500 gold galleons for each one." In this way, as he walked, he began to estimate the prices of various things in the principal's office. This action made Dumbledore very sure that if he didn't give the other party money today, this guy would definitely find a way to occupy his office. Especially when Cole walked up to Dumbledore and picked up the bag of candy that he had hidden under the desk. He made a bland assessment. "These are specially made candies, very rare. I'll give you 50 gold galleons per bag. In this way, if we empty out the principal's office, we'll also have your bird there. I think that's about it. If you don't agree, I'll appeal tomorrow and apply for compulsory property execution." The solid bottom line completely disappeared after the hidden bag of candy was found by Karl, and Fox beside him shouted in dissatisfaction. Dumbledore had no choice but to compromise. The only thing he wanted to do now was to get this kid away as soon as possible. However, he had one last request. He looked at Carol helplessly and said, "Well, Mr. Hohenzollern, be kind to an old man first, and I can sign this contract, but there can't be any problems with this contract, and you can't use this debt demand to force me to do something else." Karl was very happy to see that the other party finally compromised, and his previous harsh expression immediately turned back to his usual harmless self. He patted his chest and said, "Of course not. You are the principal. Who can force you to do anything? But considering the debt, you are unwilling to let the school bear it as a whole, so this debt must be repaid by you alone, which would take too long. We will give you some from time to time. It's a very thoughtful position to speed up the repayment of debts, and you are allowed to refuse. So do you have any questions?" What other problems could there be? What other problems could he have? Dumbledore thought angrily. He couldn't just stand by and watch. Karl took his phoenix away, and what was even more infuriating was why Fox didn't even try to resist. Thinking of this, he quickly signed the contract and then threw the parchment to Karl. "I hope you can keep your promise and not add unnecessary scars to your troubled magical world." Karl paid no attention to all this. He calmly put away the parchment and opened his arms, treating the entire principal's office as his own stage. He paced slowly in circles and said with disdain, "Don't worry so much, my dear headmaster. I will never become the so-called Dark Lord, because in my eyes, this lifeless magical world doesn't need a pervert who only knows how to use violence. It's someone who can provide high quality crimes. The Muggle world is the same. It needs a villain of a high level. People nowadays are so lazy that even crime seems so low level." Chapter 60, Carol, the Greedy Demon. Watching this spirited young man pacing back and forth in the principal's office, giving a speech with his arms open. It was as if the whole world was already in his hands. Some people were just like this, naturally attractive. Looking at Karl, Dumbledore's thoughts drifted far away. He still remembered more than half a century ago. There is also such a person in the magical world, a handsome young man with charisma, who can attract a group of believers with just his gestures. They are so similar, yet completely different. Grindelwald is charming and decisive. Karl always smiles at others and seems harmless, but by the time you realize it, you have already fallen into his trap. It seems that this little bastard is in some ways much more dangerous than Voldemort. But when he came out of his thoughts, Carol had disappeared. In the huge principal's office, there was only an old man and his bird left. On the other side of the castle, in the auditorium, young wizards of all grades were enjoying their dinner, or they gather in groups of 3 or 5 to play the Hearthstone card game. As soon as Carol stepped into the door of the auditorium, he raised his hands and said loudly, "All eyes on me. I have an announcement to make." After hearing this shout, everyone stopped what they were doing and looked at Karl, who was standing at the door. After everyone's attention was focused, Karl immediately pretended to be very excited and spoke loudly. "Today is an exceptionally good day. The school has finally realized that Professor Binns has serious problems in his role as professor of magical calendar science, so We have decided to let this teacher who has served Hogwarts for his entire life officially retire and be promoted to the honorary president of the British Wizarding History Research Association. Everyone applaud. These few words made the students look confused, but there were still many students who applauded out of respect. Among them was our Miss Beaver, who clapped her hands vigorously. This was the first time, since she entered school, that she felt truly happy about something Karl had done. After the first wave of applause, which heightened the mood, Karl immediately continued, at the same time, to celebrate Professor Binns' promotion, our great headmaster Dumbledore has decided to pay for it alone. Professor Binns' labor compensation for hundreds of years, and considering that the great Professor Binns no longer needs this money, so now we have decided to distribute it based on the number of students. There are a total of 1500 students in the school, and each of them will receive 20 gold galleons. As soon as these words were spoken, all the students were stunned for a moment, and then there was a burst of loud applause and cheers. Many students jumped up excitedly, but they all looked at Cole with deep gratitude. At this moment, he is the king of Hogwarts and the hero of all students. I sat down to have a meal, and suddenly heard that I could get paid. Is there anything better in the world than this? But Karl certainly wasn't doing this for charity, as he was surrounded by the constant voices of gratitude from the crowd. He took Cedric, and they walked to a corner outside the auditorium. Cedric was still a little nervous, thinking that Carol wanted to do something to him, so he stood there blankly with his eyes closed and his body straight. This made Carol's cheeks twitch wildly, and he said unhappily, I forbid you from going to read those meaningless novels with those little girls like Hannah again. What about my beautiful junior and the secret between me and my senior? Let me discover them again. Trust me, I will use magic to turn you into a girl completely, and you won't have such thoughts anymore. After scolding the other party, Carol immediately asked again, what was your first thought after hearing the news? Cedric was a little dizzy after being scolded, and also realized that his behavior just now was a little inappropriate. She answered quickly with a blushing face, of course. Taking advantage of the great relief you have brought us this time, we will do everything we can to give even one gold galleon to every little wizard. We put them all into our pockets, not a penny was spared. This boy is teachable. This answer made Karl very satisfied, thinking that all his training for so many days was worth it. Yes, this is Karl's real purpose. He would go to great lengths to secure labor compensation for Professor Binns, but of course it couldn't be his conscience. It is impossible that he did it to make the girl happy. He always has his own purpose in doing things and only does things for his own purpose. He did this only because he had discovered it. Thanks to the sales of the card packs, the students at Hogwarts no longer have much money to buy new card packs. So how can this be possible? One gold galleon is worth 10 points. No matter how small a mosquito leg is, it is still meat. So Cole works so hard. Professor Binns must be given justice, and he must be treated just like the Federal Reserve was treated during the financial crisis. Continue to inject new funds into your own card market to ensure the prosperity of the market and ensure that you can earn more. As for using this loan contract to make that old man Dumbledore work for him for free, it doesn't matter. After all, judging from the current situation, after these little wizards have money, 80 to 90% of it will be used to buy their own cards. All he had to do now was to put the remaining 10% into his own pocket. So he took out a few samples of gold edition dynamic character cards that he had prepared in advance, handed them to Cedric, and gave instructions at the same time. Contact the Weiss brothers right now and have them spread the word about the Hearthstone card game. A version update will be released soon, and new card packs will be added. In addition, the first batch of card packs will include extremely rare gold and dynamic legendary cards, and we are making concessions. Students who pre-order card packages can enjoy a 8% discount, so they don't need to wait until Professor Binns' gold galleons are handed over to them one by one before taking any action. You can sign up now. As long as you agree to buy, we can give them a bond that can be exchanged for a new card pack at any time. And the same procedure should be applied to those students who are muggle-borns, most of whom come from well-off families. It's Just that the amount of gold galleons that can be exchanged for pounds is limited every year, so there is less desire to buy. The more he spoke, the greedy expression on Carol's face became more and more intense, and he now seemed like the greedy devil who ruled Hell Point. He vowed to put every gold galleon in circulation at Hogwarts into his own pocket. So he continued to settle this. They simply deposit pounds into their corresponding account at the Bank of England. You can also receive a bond that can be exchanged for a card pack at any time. The amount of pounds is limited. How can we exchange them for card packs of corresponding value according to the market price? At the end, Karl looked at the stunned Cedric, slapped his buttocks hard, and spoke loudly. There is no time to think. Let's do it now. This time, including the interest from the principal, the total is about 3 gold galleons. I don't want to see even a penny slip out of my fingers. Run away right now. Faced with such urging, Cedric did not dare to hesitate for a moment and quickly quickened his pace to implement Karl's plan. Cole was left alone, standing in the corner of the corridor. Listen to the voice of the dog system in your mind. Congratulations to the host. You have successfully helped the principal to get a loan to work. You are worse than anyone else. You will be rewarded with 1 points, current points. 49,000. When the points reach 100 million, the system will be upgraded, and the host will be able to exploit the target, expand to the entire magical world. Let this beautiful magical world see what a real villain is. Hehe. Chapter 61 Wonderful Hogwarts. Another wonderful weekend. At 9 o'clock in the morning, Carol yawned and went to the bathroom to wash up and change into a custom-made robe. He went straight back to the dormitory, sat behind his desk, and started dealing with matters. That's right. He now has a desk, and this 4-person dormitory has been converted into an office. All the decoration styles, tastes, and even the materials used are aligned with the principal's office. The entire dormitory was magnificent, and even the oil lamps and candles used for lighting were replaced with sparkling fluorescent gems. After all, you have been working hard to provide benefits for your family for so long, so you should definitely enjoy them. What? You said 1 gold galleon for a card pack is too expensive? Come on, how can it be expensive? It has been this price for many years. Moreover, it is very difficult to make magic cards. Karl's Hearthstone cards are really not made of materials picked up on the roadside. The price has been the same for so long. Why is it so expensive? Sometimes I should look for the reasons within myself and see if I have asked my family for money properly. Have you studied hard? After completing the moral loop, Karl began to look through his accounts. Miss Beaver usually does this at 7 AM every day. She would arrive at Hufflepuff House on time and hand the new account book of the day to Karl in person. At the beginning, he pretended to go and greet the other party in person, but the difficulty of getting up early was beyond his imagination. After several unsuccessful attempts, Karl decided to give up completely, giving Hermione 2 choices. One is that she can go into her room, put the account book down, and leave. 1 is to give the account book to the house elf and ask him to bring it to you. Finally, after Hermione's face turned red, she called him a scoundrel. The daily account book would be placed on his desk on time by the house elf. Looking at the beautiful handwriting on the paper, as well as the detailed and professional techniques, Karl expressed his satisfaction, saying that she was worthy of being the woman who would become the Minister of Magic in the future, as this set of things was really a piece of cake. But even so, Karl compared the account books of these days with the transactions of the previous few days. He clearly noticed that sales of Hearthstone cards began to decline. Even the consumption of card packs still accounts for 80 to 90% of the daily consumption of the vast majority of Hogwarts students. But Cole was upset that he couldn't get the last 10%, you know. A few days ago, when Malfoy was holding a set of pure gold cards, he pressed Ron, who was only using an ordinary deck, to the ground in the auditorium and rubbed him. The sales of card packs once had a very obvious upward trend, but in the past few days, it has dropped so obviously. There must be other reasons. After all, owning a set of golden legendary cards is a very cool thing among classmates. Karl even launched an event where whoever purchased the most cards could have a set of professional card back patterns customized in his image. You should know that this kind of reward will only be given to students who have the best test scores and the highest overall points added to the school throughout the semester. That's right. In order to improve the learning environment at Hogwarts, Karl was very immoral and asked Professor McGonagall. I recommended a school governance system from a large eastern country where monthly exams are held and the exam results are ranked and made public. The learning content of each unit is tested separately and all these things make students miserable. Of course there are exceptions, such as Ravenclaw House, which expressed absolute support for this plan. But Hufflepuff was in a terrible situation. As a result, the entire academy seemed too useless compared to the other 3 academies. At lunch yesterday, Cedric once questioned Karl in public. "Are you trying to destroy Hufflepuff House?" Faced with such groundless accusations, Karl expressed hurt and said he would never accept criticism. Because it's simple. He has only one principle in doing things, and he will only act for his own benefit. His plan was to win over Ravenclaw House, gain the support of Professor Flitwick, and at the same time, bring Professor McGonagall to his side. Now, Gryffindor House, because of its abundant energy and quick minds, can always create very creative decks in Hearthstone and other entertainment fields. It has already taken the lead, so naturally it is very grateful to Karl. Slytherin House, needless to say, the proud little snake is the richest in the school. He has nothing but money. The gold card combination and customized card back fully meet their needs for showing off. So he treated Karl as his own, especially after he launched a set of limited edition card backs with a customized emerald with the Slytherin school emblem. Slytherin's opinion of Karl has changed from a slightly special Hufflepuff. Became the most tasteful, most Slytherin-like Hufflepuff in history. This kind of evaluation coming from the mouths of these little snakes was already an urgent praise. There is no need to say much about Professor Snape. The 2% profit that I gave him has already made him a fortune. With the addition of Harry's women's clothing, he can be completely considered one of our own. As for Hufflepuff House, that's much simpler. Cole will give you a recipe from a country full of foodies. After it was added to the daily cafeteria menu, all previous resentments instantly disappeared. Especially after they have eaten Darnpo pork, sweet and sour spare ribs, squirrel fish, 4 happiness meatballs, and braised lion head. In their hearts, Karl is already a godlike existence. Even the house elves were extremely grateful to Karl, because Cole was the most outstanding employee among them. Wearing that cheap metal, he could show up at breakfast, lunch and provide services to other young wizards. Of course, he didn't do this to satisfy his own morals, but simply because it could improve his dining experience. Just like that, in less than half a month, the deans of the 4 major colleges all agreed with Karl. Students from the 4 major colleges treated him as one of their own. And even the house elves got what they wanted. As he had said before in the headmaster's office, this was the golden age of Hogwarts, and everyone had a bright future. Except for the principal, who can only save less than 100 gold galleons every year after daily expenses. From time to time, he would look at Carol with resentful eyes. After all, the interest was calculated according to the previous loan contract. He would have to work for the Carver for at least 200 years to pay off his debt. Thinking of this, Carol smiled with relief. He slowly closed the account book and prepared to go out for a walk. By the way, find out the reason for the decline in sales. Just as he was about to get up and leave, the one he placed on the upper left corner of his desk, which he had kept since he entered Hogwarts, the magical enamel egg that was obtained finally showed movement after more than half a month of incubation. It is called incubation, but in fact it is just roasting on the fire. The incubator provided by the dog system is more like a liquefied gas stove that does not require natural gas to burn. Karl even thought at one point that he might have accidentally turned up the fire a little too high and had roasted the magical enamel egg. But every time he prepared to take this huge egg to the kitchen to make fried rice. There is always some movement coming from this giant egg. Finally today, the little guy seemed to be hatching. Karl was very happy about this, but also a little curious. He wanted to see what kind of magical animal would hatch. Just as he was imagining in his mind, powerful magical animals like Thunderbird. A golden bird's beak finally pecked through the eggshell, and a round little guy broke out of the eggshell. There was a loud bird song, and Karl looked at the little guy in front of him, muttering to himself in some confusion. What is this? A fat red owl? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 62, Resurrection of the Phoenix. The newborn seemed a little angry when he heard someone calling him a fat owl. It flapped its fledgling little wings, flew quickly to Karl, and pecked Karl's finger with its golden beak. Karl felt a little pain in his fingers, and he quickly withdrew his hand, but his eyes were still full of doubts until the voice of the dog system sounded in my mind. Host, don't doubt it, this is not an owl, it is a real phoenix. Phoenix. Cole was a little surprised, and then he kept looking up and down at the little fat bird. After looking for a long time, he said firmly, impossible, how can a phoenix be so fat? It's not like I haven't seen one before. There's one in the principal's office, he's almost as fat as a bull. The little phoenix seemed very sad when it heard its owner say that it was almost as fat as a bull. An anthropomorphic expression of surprise first appeared on his face, and then he turned his head away, hiding in the corner of the desk like a bird. Constantly drawing circles on the table with a feather was such a spiritual move that Karl began to doubt his own judgment. So I started to confirm it in my mind among the three systems. You sure this is really a phoenix? You know, the phoenix is a very powerful magical animal. In its current state, it's doubtful whether it can fly. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? The host is saying this, but it really hurts the bird's heart. This is indeed a phoenix. It's just a feature of Hufflepuff House, a little plump, that's all. You're discriminating. Serious discrimination. Karl obviously doesn't buy the system's explanation. He is an extremely sophisticated egoist and realist. He didn't want any useless things, so he first took the fat bird that was sulking in the corner. I held it in my arms and stroked it. It felt good, but it was a little too round. If it weren't for the feathers on this little guy's body, he would have suspected that you were holding a football in your arms just when he was preparing to send this little guy to the owl dormitory to let Snape train him well and help him lose weight at the same time. The dog system suddenly muttered in his mind. This phoenix has little combat power, but it will communicate with you in a spiritual way once your life is in danger. It can sacrifice itself to help you block a fatal blow, which is equivalent to giving you a resurrection armor, but you are still not satisfied. Hearing this, Karl, with a face full of shame, placed the little fat bird in front of him, stroked the feathers on its head, and said apologetically, I didn't expect you to be so useful and dedicated. I was wrong about you. You don't need to lose weight. What's wrong with being a little fat? Being fatter is better. We can't have a discriminatory mentality. But, although he said this, Cole was constantly asking the system in his mind, do you have any better bird feed, especially the kind with hormones to make it fatter? This little thing has such a small body area. If it accidentally fails to help me block the magic beam, wouldn't that be a big loss? It's better to eat fatter so that the defense area is large enough to avoid emissions. By the way, after this little guy dies, how long will it take to be resurrected? How long is the cooldown time of my resurrection armor? Can the corpse be reused? Such completely inhuman words made the dog system speechless for a moment. After a long silence, the voice sounded again. To abnormal host, reward points 279,800. Current points, please keep up the good work and run all the way to the villain. Just a reminder, the reason why this phoenix became like this is just a special case, and it will return to normal after Nirvana. Hearing this, Carol couldn't help but feel a little sorry. Isn't being chubby cute? Why should he return to normal? But I thought that it would be good if I could return to normal. I could use this fat bad to do other things. After weighing the pros and cons, Karl still thought that it would be better to let the other party die first, which would be good for both man and bad. Thinking of this, he immediately snapped his fingers, and the house elf that had been lurking in the dark immediately appeared. He held his chest high and displayed the cheap metal badge in front of Karl. In response, Carol had no preparation to boast, but instead gave the order in his usual cold and indifferent manner. From now on, You must provide Albus with 3 meals a day on time. That's right. He planned to name his phoenix Albus Dumbledore. Because of that old guy point, he refused to let him get close to his phoenix, saying that he had bad intentions and wanted to take his bird away point. This is simply slander. Today he has to vent his anger. After giving the order, he looked at the little fat bird that was still enjoying his caressing point. After thinking about it, he gave a special reminder: prepare more sweets and mix some candies into the feed. It should like it. Besides, the 3 meals a day seem to be a little less. 5 meals a day. How can I let my Albus down? These words made the house elves a little confused, but it only lasted for a moment. After Karl gave the order, the guy immediately said happily, Mr. Hohenzollern actually let me feed a phoenix. Kirby is really very happy. Kirby is the happiest house elf in the world. Mr. Hohenzollern is the greatest wizard in the world, even greater than Headmaster Dumbledore. Karl was very pleased with the flattery, and he spoke more, since he could speak, so he was in a good mood. Point as the clock strikes 10 AM, Cole prepares to leave for the cafeteria for an early lunch. Point before leaving, he deliberately touched the little fat bird's head and said with an extremely gentle and considerate expression, "You must eat well, grow up quickly, don't care about other people's eyes, and eat more desserts if you like them. You are the most beautiful phoenix in the world. Your figure is already perfect." This poor phoenix was a sure win. The little thing happily rubbed Karl's palm with its little head. Point however, he had no idea that the handsome angelic boy in front of him had already begun planning how to use his body to resist death. Point simply put, this little thing has no idea that every bite of food it eats from now on will not be in vain. Point it will be the first meal of my life. Point on the other side, as soon as Karl arrived at the common room, he found that something was wrong in the huge common room. Point no one is playing Hearthstone now. Everyone is sitting there, holding something like a newspaper, and watching it carefully. Point they were whispering to each other from time to time, which made Karl very worried, and a little angry. Point she began to look for Cedric in the common room, wanting to ask him how he did his job. Point how can they not play games, but just sit there watching things and studying? How can this be acceptable? It will ruin their motivation to study. I can't bear to see my classmates fall into depravity. Chapter 63 CEDRIC and -039 S Hidden Secret. After searching for a long time, Karl finally found Cedric hiding in the corner of the common room. Point seeing that the other party was looking at something furtively, Karl decided to tease him and quietly walked behind him. Point then he suddenly reached out to take the poster that the other person had placed on the left side of the table. Point what he didn't expect was that Cedric reacted quickly. He immediately leaned over and pressed the thing on his right side tightly into his body. Point this action made Karl very sad, and he always felt a sense of deja vu. Point it was like a short video I saw in my previous life, where a boy invited a girl to eat hot pot and was about to pick up the chopsticks placed next to the girl. Point but the other party snatched the phone next to the chopsticks and held it tightly in his arms. Damn it. Why did Karl feel like he was being cheated on? His rebellious psychology suddenly got the better of him. Point he immediately started to fight with Cedric, two handsome boys, in front of everyone. Point the constant pulling and tugging attracted a group of blushing little witches who gathered around and pointed and talked. Point from time to time, there would be a burst of unpleasant laughter. In the end, just like in previous quarrels, Cedric was the first to give in. He took Karl's arm and whispered, "Don't push it anymore. It's already causing misunderstandings. Come closer and I'll tell you what this is." As they spoke, the two men turned their backs at the same time. Cedric opened the collar of his shirt and let Karl look inside. Point soon, Karl saw something yellow and said with disappointment, "Isn't it just a few galleons? Is it necessary to hide it like this? Are you afraid that I will steal it from you? To tell you the truth, I have no interest in money right now." Such Versailles remarks made Cedric very unhappy. He put his purse away first and then spoke unhappily, "That's right. Now, basically all the cash in the hands of all the students in the school has been taken away by you. Of course you don't care about these things, but I have to. I also want to buy a new broom so that I can show off in the Quidditch game." Quidditch. Cole was a little confused, and Cedric handed him the paper. Next to him pointed was a poster announcing that Quidditch tryouts would take place after school next Monday, and that first year flying lessons would begin this week. After seeing this poster, Karl finally understood why the sales of his magic cards had declined significantly. It used to be the headline of the Hogwarts trending list, but it has been taken over by other sports. This made him very unhappy, but it was normal when he thought about it. The status of Quidditch in the wizarding world was similar to that of football in the Muggle world. It is undoubtedly the #1 sports and entertainment sport, and almost all students are obsessed with this sport. After the tussle, the two of them walked towards the cafeteria together to avoid the group of girls who were watching the fun. Along the way, no matter where we went, we could hear the little wizards discussing flying brooms and Quidditch. Even students who have no interest in participating in it are familiar with the professional terms of Quidditch. You know what? I once rode a broom around a Muggle helicopter for a long time. Did the helicopter know? It's the thing with the spinning head. The Muggle was so scared that he almost fell out of it. Malfoy was sitting at the Gryffindor table, telling his story with great enthusiasm. Looking at the expressions of the audience, it should be obvious that they have heard it many times and everyone has a bored expression. Ron was particularly unconvinced. His intuition told him that Malfoy must be bragging. So when he saw Karl and Cedric entering the cafeteria together, he couldn't wait to point at Karl and say, "Mr. Hohenzollern is well informed and was born in the Muggle world. He must know what you mean by a helicopter. I need Mr. Hohenzollern to verify whether what you said is true or false. You must be lying." After Ron finished speaking, Malfoy looked embarrassed at first, then immediately started arguing with Ron, saying with disdain, "Who do you think you are? Don't think that just because you are good at playing Hearthstone cards, you are Mr. Hohenzollern's friend. A wizard like him who is born noble and elegant can only make friends with us Slytherins who are equally noble and elegant. You are a brainless Gryffindor, also known as Mr. Hohenzollern's friend. Don't you know what you are?" These words immediately aroused resentment from both sides, including the Slytherin student next to Malfoy. He also followed Malfoy's example and began to spray venom at the Gryffindor students crazily. The Gryffindor students immediately stood beside Ron and began to passionately confront the Slytherin students. Seeing that the two colleges were confronting each other again, Karl adhered to the principle of less trouble is worse than more. Bringing Cedric, he quietly came to the Hufflepuff table and decided to mind his own business, but as soon as he sat down, and before he had time to order, Harry, with a worried look on his face, came over and looked at Karl eagerly and said, "Why can't everyone just get along with each other in a friendly way? Malfoy didn't have such malicious intent towards me before. Why is it that when they meet Ron, these two people are like enemies meeting each other, always mocking each other?" Faced with this question, Karl could only sigh that Harry had no deep understanding of his charm after dressing as a woman. Although Karl taught this magic to Harry, Harry no longer needs to trouble Karl every time he dresses up as a woman. The effect of the magic don't be affected by the change of the caster. The disguised Harry's figure is not as hot as before. But the refinement of their faces has been improved. Just think about it. This is for two 11-year-old boys. What does this mean? So Karl can be sure that the focus of the conflict between the two people is Harry. What should you do at this time? Should you tell the other person the truth or make a choice? Of course, don't let the other person go. Karl made his choice quickly. He looked Harry up and down and spoke slowly in his unique seductive tone. "Mr. Potter, this question is difficult for me to answer, but I can let you find the problem yourself. Think about it carefully. When you become a girl, is it true that the conflict between the two people in front of you is not so intense? They will all put aside their prejudices because of your beauty, but once you turn back into a boy, conflicts between the two will quickly erupt. Isn't that right?" This ambiguous answer immediately evoked Harry's memories, although he tried hard to deny in his heart the answer he didn't want to know. But after thinking about it carefully, Harry could only sigh helplessly and look at Karl eagerly. But, that macup is so embarrassing. Seeing that Harry was avoiding him, Karl immediately became serious and spoke seriously. "Sometimes People need to do things that go against their own hearts in order to maintain friendships. I know this is difficult, but think about it carefully. You don't want to lose your friends. Mr. Potter. Chapter 64 Flying Broomstick. This sentence completely blocked Harry's way out. He thought about it for a long time, and in the end, he could only stomp his feet in anger. Then they immediately found a deserted place, and after a burst of magical light, Miss Harley made a brilliant appearance. He didn't need to say anything. He just came between Draco and Ron, and after a moment the two gangs stopped fighting. It seemed that, because of his suggestion, an unpleasant incident between colleges was avoided. Karl expressed his satisfaction. His sense of morality was greatly satisfied. He felt that he was indeed a good student who loved school. As for what, it was because Harry had disguised himself too seldomly recently, which had affected Professor Snape's enthusiasm for work. Even if it indirectly affects the speed at which you make money, that is not the crux of the problem. It's just the incidental benefit you get accidentally when you do good things. After solving this problem, Karl took the order with a satisfied smile and calmly discussed with the house elf who was ready to serve. Give me a thick cut bacon, half fried until crispy and the other half tender, and a piece of rye bread. Finish it off with a side of sauerkraut and a mug of good dark beer. Such a kind tone deeply touched the house elf serving Karl. After expressing his gratitude profusely, he immediately returned to the kitchen and started preparing breakfast for Karl. However, shortly after the house elf disappeared, Karl immediately changed his expression and spoke to Cedric in a critical tone. Okay, now there are no other irrelevant people. You are the only one who doesn't work seriously and only thinks about the game. And you made money, but didn't think about giving back to the collective, but only about buying a flying broom. You should criticize yourself. I'm listening. What? Cedric's brain was a little fuming. He was right about Karl asking Harry to dress up as a woman. There were many complaints, but since they saw that this method seemed to indeed ease the conflict between Gryffindor and Slytherin, they did not say much. And before, you didn't have this attitude towards house elves, right? Why do you speak to me as if I had done something wrong every time you come to me? After spending half a month with Carol, Cedric often had an illusion that the person in front of him, it was very similar to some of the seniors he knew, whose girlfriends were really too arrogant and unreasonable. Every time the two of them had an argument, he was the first to apologize. Thinking of this, Cedric, who didn't want to be bullied anymore, immediately retorted, "Why should I criticize myself? I have done everything you asked me to do, and the compensation I received is my personal property. How I want to deal with it is my personal right, and you have no right to interfere with me." Oh my god. Cole was surprised to see Cedric answer like that. His capitalist killer instinct was triggered again, and he immediately shook his finger in denial. No, no, no. Mr. Diggory, you are wrong to think like this. You have to imagine what would happen if there was no team like ours. Is it possible for you to make so much money? You have to treat the team as your home. Only when the team's business grows bigger and bigger, in order to get more benefits, it is not appropriate to spend the money earned through the team on other things like this. This set of poor rhetoric in the workplace left Cedric stunned, but he is one of the smartest people in Hufflepuff. He immediately noticed the flaw in Carol's words, and said with disdain, "Then, if I help the team make more money, can you increase my share? Besides, the team is my home these days. Then, can I borrow some of the team's public resources, such as the extra cards produced privately?" Oh my god. Karl looked at Cedric in surprise. He didn't expect that this boy looked so honest on weekdays. The idea was so clear, and this set of anti-poor rhetoric in the workplace made Karl at a loss for what to do. For a moment, I could only stammer, "Oh, you still have to distinguish between public and private. It is illegal to occupy team supplies. You have to think carefully. Can't we change the subject? What kind of broom do you want to buy? And how much do you know about flying brooms?" Seeing that Cole took the initiative to change the subject, Cedric, who had finally won the argument, immediately became in a good mood and talked incessantly. "Of course it's the Nimbus 2000. It's the fastest broom in the wizarding world. If you have it, it will definitely make a big splash in a Quidditch match. As for the flying broom, Its design is very complicated, and it has many complex spells, but the most important thing is the solidified acceleration spell. The higher the level of the spell, the faster the broom will accelerate. To date, Chuanglin Company has iterated the primary acceleration countless times and has reached the highest level in the industry. It's also the industry's top secret. In other words, if you can develop a more advanced acceleration, maybe you can also set up a flying broom company. These words immediately caught Karl's attention. He thought about it silently for a while, and then jumped up with joy. He said happily, while holding Cedric's hands, "You are indeed my most capable subordinate. Why didn't I think of this? By the way, I want to ask you about the Nimbus 2000 you mentioned now. What's the price?" Cedric, who was being pulled around in circles by Karl, felt his brain stuck for a moment. After thinking for a long time, he could only speak slowly. "About 2,000 gold galleons. If you want a custom one, the price will be even higher. 2,000 gold galleons." After hearing this number, Karl couldn't help but shake his head, then sat back in his seat, sighing continuously. Cedric was completely confused and thought that the other party was worried like him because the price was too high. Being a kind-hearted man, he quickly tried to comfort her. "The price is indeed a bit high, but it's not out of reach. With the rate you're making money now, it shouldn't be a problem. If you're a little reluctant, I can let you experience it first, after I save enough money." These words were so sincere and heartfelt that the Hufflepuff students beside them couldn't help but feel moved. Cedric was indeed a good person. It seems that he is the poorest person in the entire college, but this guy still thinks about others every day. He never objects when others try to get his snacks. He is such a nice guy. Carol's mood didn't improve at all, and he said with a lament, "It seems that the preliminary investigation was not enough. If we had known that it would be so profitable, we should have started from this industry earlier. How many gold galleons have we lost? It really makes me angry just thinking about it." Hearing this, Cedric was confused for who knows how many times today. He could think of the pricing of Hearthstone card packs. He felt a little frightened and hurriedly tried to persuade him. "Broomstick, I'm not as lucrative as you think. You don't have to get into this business. There are many other places in school where you can make money." At this point, Cedric became a little anxious. He scratched his head and thought for a long time, and finally blurted out, "By the way, you must have never been to the Forbidden Forest. There are many magical animals living there. They are a huge fortune." Chapter 65 Hagrid and Rock Cake. When the words came out, Cedric felt a little regretful. He and Hagrid still had a good relationship. He had a great liking for the enthusiastic and kind giant. But between two evils, choose the lesser of two evils. Cedric was really scared when he thought of Karl's various outrageous actions. He was afraid that if he let this guy focus on his broomstick, his dream of buying a Nimbus 2000 would be ruined. It really became a dream, and I had no more thoughts, so let Hagrid suffer for now and let him take the blame. Karl, who was standing by, heard this guy talking and actually guessed what the other person was thinking. At the same time, I felt a little regretful in my heart. I had been in school for so many days, but I was only focused on collecting wealth in the castle. I forgot that the large forbidden forest outside the castle is also a huge treasure trove. What? Some people say that the magical animals in the forbidden forest are free and are not anyone's personal property. That's pure bullshit. Your own territory is your own property. As a student, Hogwarts School is Karl's home. He should have the right to control all the wealth here, and even the principal should work for him. Who would dare to object to going into the Forbidden Forest to get some magical animal furs or something like that? As for violating school rules, that is just an option that can be ignored. Action speaks louder than words. After finishing lunch, he walked out of the castle alone. Walking towards the edge of the Forbidden Forest. It's already a bit cold in the Scottish Highlands in September. Although the sun is shining today, the cold wind blows across your face. It still made people shiver, and the students passing by couldn't help but tighten their collars. Following the Black Lake, crossing the soft and fragrant grass, Karl came to a small wooden cabin at the edge of the Forbidden Forest. In fact, it can't be considered small. At least the door is 3 or 4 meters high, and the overall style of the building is very rough. It looked like a makeshift structure by a child, and it looked a lot like a giant goblin's burrow. Before Karl could get close, a black dog next to the cabin started barking. The ferocious barking and the saliva flowing from the big dog's mouth were indeed quite intimidating. But Karl understood that this big dog named Yair was a typical coward. So he just gave him a look. Yair's previous crazy barking gradually became less in tone and finally turned into just a low whimpering sound. At the same time, a dog complaint finally came from the room. "What's going on, Fanga? Is there another little wizard going to the Forbidden Forest? Stop him quickly." Then there was a series of ping pong sounds. The door was pushed open from the inside, and Hagrid walked out in a panic. With his messy hair and tangled beard, he looks sloppy, and he is nearly 3 meters tall and 2 meters wide. It does look a bit scary. However, Karl knew that the giant in front of him was very kind-hearted and eager to make friends, so he walked straight up to the other person, stretched out his right hand, and showed a harmless gentle smile. "Nice to meet you again, Mr. Hagrid. Let me formally introduce myself. My name is Karl Hohenzollern." Hagrid was stunned at first, because usually when the little wizard saw him, fear was always higher than respect. Except for the first day of school, very few little wizards would take the initiative to make friends with him. So after a moment of stunned silence, Hagrid quickly held Karl's hand with his sturdy palm and said with a silly smile, "Hello, Mr. Hohenzollern. Nice to meet you. You are a famous figure in the school." But after the greetings, Hagrid remained alert, looked around, and reminded with a serious face, "I don't know what you are doing here, but you'd better leave. Entering the Forbidden Forest without permission is against school rules. If you leave now, I can pretend I didn't see anything." Karl chuckled. He came all the way here, and his hair was messed up. If he went back like this, wouldn't it be a waste of his trip? Or thief never leaves empty-handed. Oh no, it should be a smart entrepreneur who will make a profit from every transaction. I absolutely cannot come here in vain. So he said with a smile, "Of course, I admire your work ethic, but I don't think there is any school rule that states that a good student at Hogwarts should be treated as such. Why don't you come and visit our loyal, kind and lovely ranger?" This unprecedented flattery made Hagrid blush, and at the same time, he really wanted to communicate with other people. So he quickly turned sideways and invited Carol in. Inside the room, the bonfire in the fireplace was burning brightly, with two crackling explosions coming from time to time. The whole house was warm. There was a small stool in the house, but no table, and all kinds of strange things were hanging around. It felt very much like a hunting lodge, and I looked around. Karl kept nodding. "This decoration is very atmospheric. I think I can also renovate my villa in the woods in Nevada according to this template." The two consecutive flatteries made this half-blood giant smile awkwardly. His previous business-like attitude suddenly became enthusiastic, and he wanted to arrange a seat for Carol. But he found that there was nothing in the room except a stool, so he picked it up awkwardly, wiped it, handed it to Carol, and said awkwardly, "I'm sorry, I didn't expect someone to come and visit me on purpose, so I wasn't well prepared." Karl didn't mind at all and sat on it while Hagrid sat on his bed. After they sat down, Hagrid spoke first. "First of all, welcome to visit me. If you need any help, please feel free to ask Mr. Hohenzollern. Just call me Karl." Cole was also very casual. "All my friends can call me by my name, and I think you are no exception. Of course, if you don't want to, I won't force you." "How could this be?" Hagrid was a little nervous. He just sat down and quickly stood up, walked to the fireplace, and picked up a 30-inch iron plate. After putting it on the table, he took out a cloth bag, opened the bag and many candies rolled out. He searched the room for a long time, and took out a few dark brown shield-like cakes. "Have some candy and some freshly made rock cakes." Karl picked up the candy with a smile, and took just one bite out of politeness. As for the cookies, he only gave them to express his gratitude. At the same time, he was full of curiosity about it. He picked up a piece, put it in his hand, and tapped it gently with his knuckles. Soon, a crisp sound similar to that of ceramic could be heard from the surface of the biscuit. Karl's capitalist killer instinct was immediately activated, and he picked up the rock cake and walked to the fireplace. I put it on the flame and roasted it for a while, then checked it carefully and found that there was no crack on the surface. What's the problem, Karl? This series of operations made Hagrid a little dazzled, and he asked in confusion. Cole was extremely happy. He turned to look at Hagrid and asked slowly with his signature smile, "Do you want to make money, sir? If possible, can you teach me the recipe of this cookie? I guarantee a lot of people will enjoy it, and you can make a lot of money." Chapter 66 HAGRIDN-039 S Cry. Hearing what Karl said, Hagrid was stunned at first, then he laughed. Ha 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 ha. "Mr. Hohenzollern, what you say is really interesting. I don't need that much money, but I haven't seen a little wizard who likes rock cakes for a long time. No problem, I can give you the recipe. As for making money, that's not necessary." Faced with such a generous and selfless Hagrid, Karl didn't waste any words with him. He immediately took out a brand new piece of parchment and a feather pen from the ring and asked the other person to dictate while he sat beside him and took notes. Hagrid's narration was very detailed and Cole took notes very quickly, but he still planned in his mind to persuade the other party to accept his idea of making money. This is not because he is a cheapskate who insists on sharing the profits from a profitable business with others, but he understood very well that if any business wanted to last long, it had to learn to distribute the profits. This is true for larger transactions, and eventually it reaches a national level. The reasonable distribution of interests among all stakeholders may be far more important than the project's profit margin. Just like the saying goes, if you don't take it and I don't take it, how can I get it from the top? If you don't take it from the top, how can I get it from the top? The magical world is not about fighting and killing, but about human relationships and worldly wisdom. Hagrid didn't care about all this. After Karl finished writing down the recipe, he immediately asked with great interest, "Isn't it very creative? I just said that someone will appreciate the rock cakes I made." Faced with this kind of inquiry, Karl could only laugh it off. After all, he couldn't tell the other party that he discovered this kind of cookie. It is light in weight and high in strength, and will not crack or deform even when exposed to high temperatures. I just want to use it as a technical reserve of high strength material resources. In order to enter the international military trade market, we can launch a lightweight composite armor steel point, or it can be used in possible high altitude aerospace fields in the future. As for using it as food, he never thought of it that way from the beginning. But Hagrid seemed to be determined to get to the bottom of the matter and kept asking Karl questions. How did he know that his cookies were an extraordinary delicacy? In this regard, Karl could only express his helplessness and could only glance at the recipe he had written down. He quickly changed the subject. "I noticed that the eggshell of the night shining beast is used in this recipe. This magical animal is very rare to come across. Its eggshell has always been a very precious material. How did you find it?" This topic successfully attracted Hagrid's attention. For this kind giant, magical animals were his favorite things, so he happily began to introduce to Karl the various magical animals in the Forbidden Forest. "You know the evil bird, and the silent bird, Merlin's flower skirt. They are so beautiful, but it is precisely because of those beautiful feathers that they have attracted the attention of many dark wizards. Now the number of wild birds has been greatly reduced, and unicorns are such beautiful creatures, but there are still many people who would rather risk being cursed than hurt those poor creatures. Why are these people so heartless? I've heard that in France and Germany, there is a group of dark wizards who specialize in smuggling magical animals. Those guys should go to hell. They are so bad." At the beginning, Karl listened with great interest. After all, such a vivid lesson on magical animals was worth listening to. But the more he listened, the more he felt something was wrong, especially at the end, when he saw the half-blood giant in front of him. While wiping away tears, she complained and cursed herself for some of the things she had done in France and Germany. No matter how thick-skinned Carol was, he had to make a few excuses. "That's not true. I heard that they tried to establish several magical animal sanctuaries in France and Germany. As a result, the number of magical animals in the wild in France and Germany has increased by more than 10% in just 6 months. And that can't be called smuggling. It's just selling some magical animal products obtained through normal channels legally. These words stirred up a hornet's nest. Hagrid immediately stood up and said with red eyes, "How can you defend them, Mr. Hohenzollern? They are criminals, shameless criminals. These beautiful animals belong to nature and should live freely on this land, rather than being confined in a fixed area like farmed pigs and cattle, which is wrong. Ouch!" Exclamation mark. Hagrid's accusation made Karl a little defensive, and he said in a somewhat sarcastic tone, "Oh, really? But I think, even if the Forbidden Forest of Hogwarts is vast, it still has its limits. Not to mention these magical animals, even the wizarding community, aren't they prisoners in some sense? Would they dare to stand in the sunlight and announce their identities to muggles? There is no absolute freedom, my dear Ranger. We can only work hard to achieve the best results." These words made Hagrid freeze in place. For a moment he was unable to digest the meaning of Karl's words. Karl followed up the conversation and handed a receipt to Hagrid, and at the same time, placed a modified Leica camera on the table beside him. "I came to see you today, not only to visit you, but also to hope that you can do me a favor, help me get some of the magical animal products on the receipt regularly, and I will never take your things for nothing. I will pay you for all the items according to the market value." Hearing this, Hagrid, who was still a little confused by Karl's wizard prisoner theory, he thought Karl was angry with him, so he was unwilling to accept his help and insisted on giving him money. He waved his hands hurriedly. Yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Hohenzollern. I must have scared you just now. I'm not angry with you. It just makes me sad to think about those beautiful creatures being killed innocently." At the end of his words, this kind giant actually started crying bitterly in front of Karl. His crying and snotting appearance made Karl standing next to him extremely embarrassed, as he thought that it was also because of him that the other party was also troubled. That's why I burst into tears. Although I have a clear conscience, the damp feeling of guilt still appears in my heart. Karl felt helpless and could only use his ability as an angel to walk to the other person and give him a gentle hug. Stroking the other's broad and thick back, he whispered seductively, "Don't be sad, we are still friends. The reason I gave you money is definitely not because I don't want to accept your help. On the contrary, it's because I have to do this. I also love magical creatures, so I understand your inner thoughts better." As he spoke, Karl shouted to the sky, "Albus!" With this shout, a ball of orange flame inexplicably ignited in the air, and a fat bird appeared. It made a brilliant appearance from the flames, flapped its 2 small wings desperately a few times, but finally could only land bouncily on the table. Seeing this, Karl could only stroke his forehead with his hand, while picking up Albus, who still had a candy in his mouth. Show it to Hagrid and explain it aside. "It's called Albus Dumbledore, and it's my phoenix." Chapter 67. Refusal to share the responsibility. The 2 words, Dumbledore and Phoenix, immediately aroused Hagrid's curiosity. He quickly turned his head and looked at the little fat bird squatting on the small wooden table and eating candy. He looked for a long time before asking, "Mr. Hohenzollern, you know I'm not a very thoughtful person, but I really want to ask you a question. Is this really a phoenix? Why is it so fat?" This short sentence caused such great harm to the bird's heart. Dumbledore first looked at Hagrid in surprise and didn't even notice that the candy in his mouth fell to the ground. Chirp. Then it let out a loud cry, flapped its little wings, and dived into Karl's arms, seeking comfort. Karl stroked his phoenix, pretending to be sad, and said helplessly, "Please, don't doubt it. It is indeed a phoenix. It's just that some minor accidents happened during the birth of Albus. That's why it's like this now. You know, the phoenix will be reborn after death. In fact, we only need to let it undergo a nirvana, and it will return to its original state and become noble and beautiful again. I used to think so, but now I don't think so. Even if it has flaws, it is still beautiful in my heart. All magical animals are like this. Even if the world doesn't need them now, I still think that the world should give them a place to stay. So touching, Hagrid shouted, and then burst into tears. The kind giant kept wiping his tears with a rag. He kept apologizing. I'm sorry, Mr. Hohenzollern. I once doubted your motives for coming to me for a second. Now, it seems that I really deserve to die. I shouldn't have thought that way. You are a kind and selfless person. He kept crying, and Albus in Karl's arms kept moving around. To outsiders, it seemed that the phoenix was sobbing because it was moved by Karl's heartfelt words, but in fact, it was Karl who was desperately holding down the little fat bird's head to prevent it from looking up and looking at him. After all, when telling a lie, it is better not to make eye contact with the person involved. Just like that, the loud crying kept echoing in the room until it reached the black rag. Only after being completely washed back to its original color by the giant's tears did Hagrid stop crying. Then he blew his nose and looked at Karl and said seriously, "Don't worry, Mr. Hohenzollern. I will definitely help you. And those plans you mentioned, can you tell me in detail?" Hearing this, Karl smiled slightly and first laughed it off, saying that his phoenix needed a long rest due to physical defects. Don't allow Albus to explain, just let him go. Then Karl began to explain to Hagrid in detail how to establish an ecological sanctuary for magical animals in Hogwarts and the issue of how to legally, compliantly, and sustainably develop the magical animal resources in the Forbidden Forest. Karl's explanation was very thorough, and Hagrid listened carefully, but he still believed that it was wrong to use those beautiful creatures for profit. This is a very bad behavior, Karl explained patiently. Do you know, in human society, there is a special existence called a zoo. There are many protests by those who call themselves environmentalists. Animals imprisoned in zoos have lost their freedom and the nature that was originally given to them by nature. They are unhappy and zoos are inhumane organizations, but many of them have never thought about a problem. Precisely because of the existence of such an inhumane organization, it has enabled many ordinary people who would never have had the opportunity to come into contact with wild animals in their lifetime to witness the beauty of these creatures. When any of us does anything, we can never demand morality and dedication from those who have nothing to do with it. You tell an ordinary person that we need to protect the earth, the environment, and biodiversity, but he is just an ordinary person. He has never seen the sea or wild animals in his life, and he has never gained even the slightest benefit from those cruel illegal hunting. Why should he contribute his own strength to these grand sounding goals? When the benefits of something cannot be shared equally, why should everyone share the responsibility? These words made Hagrid confused. Although he couldn't fully understand the meaning of Karl's words, but his simple emotions made him think that what Karl said seemed to make sense. Seeing that Hagrid was beginning to think about what he had said, Karl began to continue. So, you should think about this. The suggestion I just made, the protection of magical creatures, is definitely not something that can be changed by just a slogan. There has to be enough interest in this thing. Just like a good company, it has to make a profit to continue operating. Only if we let others see that treating magical animals well can bring long-term and sustainable benefits, can we attract more people to join in. Only when more people come into contact with these beautiful creatures, will there be more kind people like you willing to devote themselves to this cause. Protecting magical creatures is not just empty talk, and it cannot be a scam. After saying these words, Carol didn't say anything else. He just sat quietly in his seat, waiting for his words to take effect. After about 10 minutes, Hagrid suddenly stood up and began to walk deeper into the room. About 5 minutes later, he came back with a large sack on his back. He handed the big sack to Karl. These are some things I collected. They should be worth some money. I'm not very good at handling this kind of thing, but I think you're right. If possible, I would like to join the plan you mentioned. Karl took the sack and felt a heaviness in his hand. He immediately felt that the things inside were not simple, so he opened the sack and took a look. Sure enough, the bag was filled with various feathers, bones, and fire ash snake eggs. They were piled up in a mess, like the plastic bottles picked up by an old lady. There were also a few small balls of fur shining with white light. Karl could tell them apart at a glance, just by looking at the light point that is unicorn hair, a very precious thing. The best unicorn hair that can be used to make magic wands. Just one stick could easily sell for 5 gold galleons, and a few more could sell for 1 or 2 gold galleons. There are at least dozens of these little balls of fur, and now, there are at least a dozen of them in the bag alone. Seeing this, Karl's eyes changed when he looked at Hagrid. He was now sure that he was better than the one hiding in the principal's office. A poor old man who eats strange candies all day and all night and can't even afford 10,000 gold galleons. This honest and lovely giant is the real local tycoon. At the same time, Cole was also very regretful. Damn it, why didn't he discover it earlier? Such a good opportunity to make money was wasted. Regretful Karl put the thing into his ring, then looked at Hagrid very seriously and asked, I want to ask if there is a molting season for unicorns, and if there are any plants they like to eat, and after eating it, it can speed up metabolism and accelerate the replacement of hair. Chapter 68 Punishing Cedric. After a long discussion with Hagrid about new types of feed for unicorns and other magical creatures, Karl left the cabin with satisfaction. Before leaving, he deliberately took a piece of rock cake in his hand. After walking all the way back to Patch's common room, I happened to see the hard-working and nice guy Cedric. While humming a little tune, I watered the plants in the lounge in high spirits. Seeing this kid only thinking about his flying broom, he felt sorry for the leader like him who was working hard outside to make money for the team. There was no feeling of remembrance or gratitude at all, so he was furious. He deliberately shook the rock cake in his hand and walked slowly past the other person. Sure enough, Cedric soon noticed the rock cake in Karl's hand and immediately asked curiously, "What's that in your hand? It looks like a shield. A special kind of biscuit." Cole waved the rock biscuit in front of the other party and prepared to leave. When Cedric heard it was about food, as a Hufflepuff, he was of course full of curiosity about new and novel foods. So he immediately stopped the other person, came up to him and whispered, "Can you give me a taste? It may not look tasty, but you probably don't like bad food." Seeing that the boy had been fooled, Karl immediately broke off a piece of the rock cake in his hand along the groove that had been drawn long ago. There was a crisp sound as the biscuits made a snap, which immediately made Cedric's index finger move. He took the rock cake handed to him by Cole without hesitation, opened his mouth wide, and took a bite. Alas, then there was a scream, and Cedric's front teeth were not even left a mark on the hard object. Seeing this, Karl quickly took out his little notebook and wrote it down. Magic. Number 1 armor ceramic surface, good penetration resistance, test subject, Mr. Cedric Diggory. Looking at the few lines of words in the small notebook, Cedric was dumbfounded. He looked at Karl in disbelief, and then looked at the rock cake in his hand. He really couldn't imagine that Carol would actually play a prank on him, and an unspoken sense of betrayal emerged in his heart. With his chest heaving, he wanted to find Carol to argue with him, but when he looked up, the other party had disappeared, and only a light note was left there. He picked it up, and saw that it said, "You are too trusting, Mr. Cedric. Don't just eat the food handed to you by the pretty boy in the future. You must learn to protect yourself. The next time I hand you food, it won't just break your front teeth. At the same time, don't be angry, my dear senior. For the thing you want, according to our previous profit sharing agreement, I will give you 1% of today's earnings. It's enough to buy it for you. Signed Karolov." The next day, in the morning, in the cafeteria at the long table of the 4 major colleges, the freshmen were discussing one after another, because today they would start their first flying lesson. Whether it is the little snakes of Slytherin or the little lions of Gryffindor, they are all full of interest in the upcoming flying lessons. Malfoy was still bragging about himself. Ron, as always, didn't get along with Malfoy. Whenever the other party said something, he would argue with him. Okay, we also have Professor Snape's class today, and Gryffindor's little princess, Harry, will make a grand appearance as usual. Thanks to her mediation, the matter did not get out of hand. As for Hufflepuff, there were discussions as well, though hopefully not as intense as those 2 houses, which took up most of the students' energy. They all focused on their breakfast. With only one exception, Cedric. From the moment he entered the cafeteria, He kept looking around, as if waiting for something. Carl, who had been sitting next to him, was very disdainful when he saw this guy like this, and at the same time he became more determined in his inner thoughts. I must teach this guy a lesson. He is the first friend I made, and also my most recognized professional subordinate. He was very dissatisfied with Cedric for not paying attention to his work during this period. So yesterday, he deliberately played a trick on the other party. It was definitely not because he had nothing better to do, or because some bored little witch thought. She said that she was jealous because Cedric had not paid much attention to her in recent times. This is simply bullshit. I'm jealous of a broom. There is probably no joke funnier than this in the world. So to prove this point, Karl looked at Cedric's anxious look and said indignantly, "Can you please be more capable? It's just a flying broom. And please remember to follow the profit sharing agreement between us. You only have the right to use this broom. The ownership is still in my hands. And you will not receive any salary for the next 2 months." Karl thought that his words would at least make Cedric feel a little regretful. After all, according to the content of the agreement signed by the two last night, it was a completely unequal treaty. But what Karl did not expect was Cedric didn't seem to care at all about what Karl had just said, and just spoke excitedly. "I never thought I would be able to get my hands on the Nimbus 2000 so early. I'm so happy, boss. I'm calling you sincerely. As long as you give me that broom to fly once, I'll agree to do anything you want to me." Karl had a puzzled look on his face, while Hannah and the other little witches beside him suddenly blushed. When they gathered together, they would smile for unknown reasons from time to time. Karl's anger reached its peak. "Okay, so that's how you play. Bro will help you build your career. You are not allowed to find a woman, but you want to lick a broom. Since you just want to be a bootlicker, brother, let me show you what true cruelty is." Karl, who had completed the moral cycle, no longer said anything, but just stared at Cedric, who was full of joy. While tearing the sandwich in his hand into pieces with his teeth. Not long after, the door of the auditorium suddenly opened, and there was a chaotic and noisy sound, as if hundreds of birds were flying towards this side. The senior students were all used to it, and continued chatting as usual. Only the freshmen looked up expectantly. It seems to be welcoming something. Soon, flocks of owls flew in and dropped all kinds of letters and packages into the recipient's arms. In the past, this kind of high altitude delivery was often not very accurate, and sometimes some owls would throw letters into nearby soups and desserts. But it seems that their level has improved this time, and the delivery of items is as accurate as laser guidance. As for the reason, it was the pitch black raven flying behind all the owls, like the leader of a phalanx. They keep cawing while flying. Some owls who try to be lazy will be ruthlessly attacked by their owls, as expected of Snape. Even the owl was lectured by him. That is a raven named Snape. It is a gift from Professor Snape to Mr. Hohenzollern. Really? No wonder I had a sense of deja vu the moment this crow walked in. The owl's abnormal behavior immediately caused a whisper among the little wizards, and also attracted the attention of Professor Snape, who was sitting above eating breakfast. His face looked extremely ugly until Snape, leading several owls, placed a huge package in front of Karl. The whispers of the little wizards gradually stopped. Because they saw that when Karl opened the package, there was a flying broom, a Nimbus 2000. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 69. Lowering the price of the broomstick. Nimbus 2000. Karl bought a Nimbus 2000. Merlin's overalls. Where did he get all that money? Look at this broom. Its beautiful shape. My god, how can there be such a perfect thing in the world? After Karl opened the package, he unsurprisingly attracted the attention of many students. Cedric's eyes turned red, and he stared at the broom in front of him, while the Weasley twins were hiding in the distance and watching the fun. At this moment, he didn't care about Professor McGonagall on the stage and just tried his best to come over to watch the fun. At the beginning, the students' discussion mostly focused on this flying broom. There was envy and admiration in their words, but as they spoke, the tone of their voices began to become a little strange. The look he gave Carol was also filled with resentment. Especially the Weasley twins. The two brothers wiped the tears from each other's eyes, and George even stretched out a hand. He stroked the flying broom from a distance, muttering to himself while crying, "What a beautiful thing, but it's a pity that it doesn't belong to me." What's even more infuriating is that I have to pay for part of the money used to buy this broom. I earned it. His words immediately resonated with many young wizards, and the looks they gave Karl were filled with all kinds of unspeakable resentment. It's like a boss who exploits his employees on a daily basis and then takes the money earned from exploiting his employees in the end. He bought a top-of-the-line sports car, and when picking up the car, he asked all employees to come over and watch. Who can understand this feeling? However, Karl expressed his understanding, and facing many resentful eyes, he had no intention of taking the blame. As for who should take the blame, whoever wants this flying broom must take the blame. So he looked at everyone with a smile and said lightly, "Don't be envious. This is to reward Mr. Cedric, the most hardworking and professional person in our team during this period. It's a prize." "What? Why?" As soon as Karl finished speaking, the two Weasley brothers were the first to express their dissatisfaction and immediately started screaming. All the dissatisfied looks that were previously focused on Karl were transferred to Cedric without exception. After all, it is more difficult to accept the sudden wealth of colleagues and friends than being a vassal of the boss. Just when Cedric was about to explain, the two Weasley brothers pounced on him and pinned him to the ground. He didn't give the other party a chance to explain at all. He always called those classmates senior when they were eating snacks at this time. Everyone just stood by and watched, with no intention of rescuing them at all. However, most people's attention is still deeply attracted by the Nimbus 2000 in front of them. One of the little Asian girls seemed very interested in this, and she tried hard to squeeze in front of Karl. He looked at the flying broom in front of him from a close distance and said with some disappointment, "It's beautiful, but it's too expensive. If I hadn't used all my savings to buy a new card package, maybe, if I save it for a few years, I can buy one." These words once again resonated with many students. They all began to regret their previous addiction to drawing card packs and spending all their savings. Carlton sensed that something was wrong, and at the same time his capitalist killer instinct kicked in. I also immediately realized that there were huge business opportunities hidden in these complaints, so he looked at the little Asian girl and said with a smile on his face, "QIU, right? I remember you very well. It was Professor Flitwick's first charms class. You tried to stop your bad classmates from humiliating the students of our college, and I didn't even have the chance to thank you. I didn't expect that such a beautiful girl would like this kind of sports activity." Karl's words immediately made QIU blush, but this little Ravenclaw girl was still very spirited. Unlike some other little girls, who were so bewildered by Karl's simple words that they couldn't even speak. Zhang QIU said very rationally, "No need to thank Mr. Hohenzollern. I should thank you more. Your magic show is really an eye-opener. I do love Quidditch, but as you can see, I can't afford such a nice broom. But I'm very happy to see the Nimbus 2000 from such a close distance. Thank you." Although the girl's words cooled down the atmosphere to a certain extent, there were still many little wizards present. With a look of regret on his face, his eyes were fixed on the Nimbus 2000 in front of him. Seeing that the emotions were almost brewing, Carol immediately looked into Zhang Qiu's eyes and asked tentatively, "What if I could make a broomstick that performs similarly to the Nimbus 2000, but costs only 1/10 of it? Would you be interested in buying it?" "What?" Zhang Qiu exclaimed and looked at Carol. Although there was still disbelief in his eyes were full of desire. The little wizards around couldn't help but talk about it. "What? 1/10 of the price? If you buy a Nimbus for 1, then you only need 10 galleons to buy a broom of this level. No way. Absolutely impossible. If it's that cheap, I'll buy one even if I risk being beaten to death by my father." Listening to the discussions around him, Karl just chuckled and then leisurely took out his wand. He spread his hands helplessly and looked at Cedric, who was still being pinned to the ground by the two Weasley brothers. "You can see it. Dear senior, this is the wish of all my classmates, so don't blame me. After all, a flying broom is still very complicated. I need a reference target to successfully lower the price of a flying broom, thereby seeking benefits for my dear classmates. Hearing this, Cedric felt that something was wrong. He struggled desperately, trying to get up and stop Karl Point, but the Weasley brothers had no intention of letting him go. Why should you get a luxury car when we are all just workers? Could it be that the boss loves you? I must teach you a lesson today. Point. So George was responsible for holding down the other person's limbs, while Fred tried his best to cover the other person's mouth. Point. Without letting the other person make any sound, he forced him to open his eyes, staring intently. Karl held his magic wand, pointed it at the light wheel 2000 in front of him, and spoke softly. Defindo is falling apart. A red light flew out from the tip of the wand and flew straight towards the light wheel 2000 in front of it. Point. At the moment when the magical light was about to touch the flying broom, Cedric didn't care about so many things. He bit Fred's hand that was covering his mouth. As soon as Fred felt the pain and took his hand away, he immediately shouted at the loudest voice in his life, "Do not." Chapter 70 Worthless Things. Just like in many cheesy novels, the hero's loud shouting did not stop the devil from attacking the beautiful girl. Point. The red death ray still hit the beautiful girl, and her life ended at that moment. Point. Only brown hair was left, floating in the air. The male protagonist hugged that strand of hair in his arms and cried bitterly. Point. But nothing can be done. Point. Of course, all this is just Cedric's imagination. In reality, it was just a spell cast by Karl. Point. The flying broom, which was worth 2000 gold galleons, was torn into pieces, and Cedric was holding a handful of scattered broom hairs. A person stood there in a daze, as if he had lost all color, and looked completely black and white. Point. And his loud shout seemed to finally attract the fairy's attention. Point. Professor McGonagall, who was eating breakfast in the professor's seat, was already quite dissatisfied with the fact that a large group of students did not eat a proper breakfast and just gathered together. Cedric's loud shout made her unable to sit still any longer, and she quickly stood up and walked over. After dispersing the other students who were watching the fun, he immediately scolded loudly in dissatisfaction, "Fred and George, what are you two still doing here? Go back to your seats." "What on earth did you do to Mr. Diggory?" Faced with the furious Professor McGonagall, the two brothers did not dare to do anything rash. They raised their hands to show that they had done nothing to Cedric. Point. Then he ran back to the Gryffindor table, leaving Cedric alone, sitting on the ground, feeling sad. Point. After teaching the two brothers a lesson, Professor McGonagall looked at Cedric, who had turned completely black and white. Point. For a moment, he didn't know how to comfort her, so he turned his anger to Carol and scolded him. "Mr. Hohenzollern, you should know that the school does not allow first-year wizards to bring flying brooms to school, right?" Such an obvious question obviously wanted Karl to admit his mistake and give himself a way out. Point. "But who is Carol?" he said directly with his hands spread out. "I do not know." That matter-of-fact look made Professor McGonagall's eyes twitch, and she asked, while suppressing her anger, "What? How could you not know? It's clearly written on every admission letter." "I haven't received an admission letter," Karl said as a matter of course. "Besides, this broom is not mine. Buy it for me, Mr. Cedric, as a reward for his work for me. So please, dear Professor McGonagall, which school rule did I break?" After 2 or 3 sentences, Professor McGonagall began to feel a little unconfident. She stood there for a long time, unable to utter a word. Point. In the end, I could only transfer all my anger to an irresponsible old bee. It was all this stinky old man's fault. Point. Why must this troublemaker be sent to Hogwarts? Why can't he be sent to Germany? There are magic schools there. Point. After much thought, Professor McGonagall could only criticize Karl for using magic outside the classroom. "Then, you shouldn't use magic in the Great Hall. Splitting is dangerous. At the same time, if this is Mr. Cedric's thing, and you destroyed it, isn't that a bit too much? Shouldn't you apologize?" Hearing this, Cole waved his hands repeatedly, indicating that Professor was right, turned his head, and looked at Cedric with a smile, and asked in a kind tone, "Dear Mr. Diggory, will you forgive me? But Cedric was in no mood to care about these things at the moment. He had just lost his beloved and was completely immersed in grief. Seeing that the other party didn't say anything, Karl immediately looked at Professor McGonagall shamelessly and expressed confidently, "Mr. Diggory, you probably have forgiven me, but you're just too embarrassed to say it." As he spoke, he picked up the shattered Nimbus 2000 and spoke calmly, "Besides, it's just a reference. How could I possibly destroy it? I'll restore it right away." "Are you kidding?" Although Professor McGonagall was puzzled by Karl's behavior, she still reminded him that flying broom is a very advanced magical creation. It is not easy to restore it. She wanted to tell Carol that he was taking this matter too lightly, but before she could finish her words, Carol was stared at by everyone with a ghostly look on his face. He began to methodically reassemble the broken broom, his movements as skillful as a machine. Cole was very satisfied with everyone's surprise. He was indeed just borrowing it for reference. The reason why he gave this valuable flying broomstick was because of it. It was disassembled into a pile of parts, just to familiarize myself with all the components of the broom, but just now the spell hit the broom. His eyes were like a high-speed camera, accurately capturing and scanning every part of the broom. As well as the different spells engraved on each component, while using the memory palace in the brain to quickly transform. This Halo 2000. A three-dimensional model is constructed in the mind. Just within a few seconds in Karl's memory palace, you have already conceived the design drawings of the highest level flying machine. The only thing he had to do now was to reverse engineer the project. He moved quickly and with great skill. In less than a moment, the entire broom had been restored to 80%. In the end, Heo walked to Cedric, whose color had been restored. With a smile on his face, he held out a hand and smiled. "Hand over your late wife's hair, or you will have to ride on a bare broomstick in future competitions." Faced with such ridicule, Cedric was not angry at all. He just handed the broom in his hand to Karl like a puppet. Cole took the broom and snorted coldly with disdain written all over his face. "Look at how little you have achieved. You looked so sad just now. I'm afraid that if something happens to me in the future, you won't be so sad, you bastard." After cursing, Karl skillfully assembled the last part onto the already completed Light Wheel 2000. In less than a minute, the Nimbus 2000, which had just completely fallen apart, was miraculously restored. Karl threw the broom to Cedric with disdain, looked at the other's surprised eyes, and shook his head. "Don't be so surprised. I said I was just learning from it. Now the flying broom has no value to me anymore. I will never keep anything that has no value, so please work hard, senior. Don't be tempted by such low-end things. If one day you become worthless to us, I will abandon you." Karl enjoyed this immature speech very much, coupled with Cedric's stunned expression. He thought he was really handsome like this, with an unfathomable villain image. So, under the complicated gazes of the crowd, he waved his sleeves, left the stage in a dignified manner without leaving a single cloud behind. He didn't notice at all that Hannah, who had been sitting next to him, was blushing and working hard on her little notebook. It records what Carol just said. As for the cover of the little notebook, it probably says something like the domineering junior and the gentle senior. It was not until he walked out of the auditorium that the voice of the dog system suddenly came into his mind. Successfully capture the hearts of a group of fangirls and get 1000 points as a reward. At the same time, make an excellent boy fall in love with you and add 1 to your male charm. Current points: 376,000. Male charm 89. Please keep up the good work and you will soon make boys fall in love with you completely. What is the true taste of the devil? It is very simple. He is only attracted by the best things. Both men and women are no exception. Hearing this, Carol was really full of question marks and shouted in his heart. What the asterisk chapter 71 Karl 039's second entrepreneurial project. Time flies, and a month has passed in a flash. During this month, Hogwarts seemed unusually quiet and almost nothing special happened. Except that Harry seems to have become addicted to the feeling of being surrounded by people and basically appears in girls' clothes every day. In addition to Quidditch matches, Cedric was invincible on the field with his Nimbus 2000. Apart from the serious protests from Other colleges, only some young wizards who wandered around at night, had reported and claimed this. I often saw a figure who looked very much like Professor Quirrell sneaking in and out of the castle at night. Apart from that, everything was so quiet and peaceful that Dumbledore, as the headmaster, really had a few good days. Of course, today is not included. Looking at Karl sitting behind his desk, tasting sherry and playing with Fox. Dumbledore returned to the headmaster's office and could only ask in the calmest tone possible, while twitching his face, "Mr. Hohenzollern, why are you here? I don't remember inviting you to the principal's office. How did you get in?" Karl did not rush to answer Leodeng's question, but took out the magical animal feed that he had just experimented with. After feeding everything to Fox in front of him, he began to silently observe the phoenix in front of him. I want to see if there are any adverse reactions, such as diarrhea or something else. After all, when he fed this newly developed feed to his Albus, many adverse reactions occurred. For example, severe diarrhea, or constant hair loss, or if you are afraid of your own resurrection nail. It has entered CD mode before it is used. There is no need for me to come all the way to Leodeng's office to pick up his bird. Fortunately, however, Fox ate all the feed and did not seem to have any adverse reactions. Moreover, the feed seemed to taste good. The entire 200 grams of feed was eaten up by this proud phoenix. After confirming his first project and achieving success, Karl nodded happily. Sitting in the principal's seat, he pointed to the small table and chair he had made before and said with a smile, "Don't be so surprised, dear principal. After all, according to our previous loan agreement, the debt between you and me is between us. It is secured by this principal's office. Considering the interest on this debt for 1 year, it is 1,000 gold galleons. That's the most you can save each year, but it's less than 1/5 of the interest, so I have to think about getting used to this office first, so that you can use it better when you default on your debt." What? Dumbledore's old face was full of question marks. He looked at Karl sitting in his seat in disbelief. Looking at the other party's self-righteous look, I couldn't help but say indignantly, "Tom, never thought of occupying my office back then. You really don't want to be the next mysterious man. I can now confirm that you are much worse than any of them. You can't do this, Mr. Hohenzollern. I refuse to acknowledge what you just said." Seeing that the other party was about to cheat, Cole was too lazy to waste time talking to him. He finished the sherry in the glass and smashed the expensive crystal wine glass to the ground. The wine glass broke and was smashed as a signal, and a figure quickly walked out from the shadows on the side. As soon as he appeared, he greeted Dumbledore very gracefully. "It's been a long time since I last saw you, Principal. I think it's not a good idea to act like a spoiled brat in front of a child. You're still as funny as ever." After seeing the other person's face, Dumbledore was also a little surprised. "Lucius, why are you here?" Lucius did not answer this question directly. Instead, Karl, who was sitting in the headmaster's seat, looked at Dumbledore and said, "I asked Mr. Lucius to come here because I felt that there was a lovely but unreasonable old man who wanted to default on his debt with me today. But I want to remind you that you are the top leader of the school, but the ownership of Hogwarts belongs to your board of directors." As he spoke, Carol made a gesture for them to sit down again, motioning for them to sit down. Lucius on the side was very polite. He returned the greeting gracefully and then sat down slowly, but Dumbledore was obviously still a little angry. After looking around for a long time, he reluctantly sat down on the chair where Carol had sat before. As soon as the two sat down, Karl immediately took out his wand and waved it lightly in the air. A white light curtain immediately appeared in the center of the principal's office. The moment the light curtain appeared, blue light was projected onto it, forming a three-dimensional image of a flying broom that was extremely handsome and as sharp as a blade. It was projected like this, and Dumbledore looked at the brilliant model floating in the air, spinning constantly. I have to say that Professor Flitwick is right. Karl's talent in spells is indeed extraordinary. He heard Professor McGonagall's report a few days ago that Karl used the colorful light and shadow magic he invented. They have created something called an ultra-thin liquid crystal display device. It has now been purchased by many shops in Diagon Alley as new advertising signs or product display interfaces. At first, he didn't have much feeling about it, but after seeing it with his own eyes today, he had a hunch. This kid might really bring about a radical change to the whole world as that guy predicted. I don't know whether it is good or bad. At least for now. Although Karl is a little naughty, many of the things he does are right, except that he likes to play pranks. It didn't seem like there was anything out of the ordinary, but there was a special feeling that always gave him a premonition. Today, I might be in trouble. But no matter what Dumbledore was thinking, Karl, sitting in the headmaster's seat, did not hesitate for a moment. He immediately shouted excitedly, "Dear Headmaster and respected Mr. Malfoy, what you have witnessed today is the result of a month of my time. The ultimate product, Absolute Blade number 1, has passed NASA's wind tunnel test. The drag coefficient is less than half of the Nimbus 2000. The exterior is carefully designed by Rolls-Royce, the representative of British elegance for a century. This flying broom will usher in a whole new era." After he finished speaking, Rose immediately clapped excitedly, while Dumbledore on the side looked completely dumbfounded. Although he had also heard about the promise Karl made to many students in the cafeteria a month ago. A broomstick with similar performance to the Nimbus 2000, but only 1/10 of the price will be produced. Professor McGonagall and Professor Snape were both present at the scene. After this news spread, most people treated it as a joke. But what he never expected was that this guy was serious, and he actually made such a thing in just 1 month. This can no longer be considered a genius. This is simply a monster. Chapter 72, The Useless Principal. But no matter how surprised he was, Dumbledore was more confused, so before Cole was about to start his speech again, he interrupted with his hand. "Dear Mr. Hohenzollern, your magic of light and shadow, as well as your imagination, are indeed very surprising, but I want to ask a question. You came to my office today and asked Mr. Malfoy to come here as well. For what exactly?" As soon as he finished speaking, Lucius looked at Karl in surprise, and Karl looked at Dumbledore in surprise. The three of them just stared at each other for a long time. Karl asked tentatively, "Dear Principal, are you sure you don't know why I invited Mr. Lucius here, and why does this 3-person meeting have to happen right?" Hearing this question, Dumbledore's intuition told him that something seemed wrong, but when facing Karl, in other words, when facing the Grindelwald family, he understood more clearly that excessive thinking was meaningless, and that straightforward honesty was more effective. After all, if it comes to playing tricks, I'm sure I can't beat this little bastard in front of me. So he nodded directly, indicating that he had no idea why such a meeting took place. Seeing this old man admit it so shamelessly, Carol was really furious. He suppressed his anger and said in a sarcastic tone, "Now, all the students in the whole school are eagerly looking forward to my launch of this new product and the initial production of the product. It was done by the house elves in the kitchen, with some aesthetic advice and Professor McGonagall providing valuable tips. In terms of materials, Professor Snape made a great contribution. Not to mention Professor Flitwick helped me solve many problems that I could not understand before. This is a product that brings together the expectations of all students, the efforts of the 4 major colleges, and the hard work of all professors. It's going on sale tomorrow, and you're the headmaster of Hogwarts, and you're telling me you have no idea what's going on." By the end of his speech, Karl's tone had turned into a roar, and he shouted indignantly, "I even asked Professor Quirrell about it, but he ignored me, dear headmaster, except for the fact that you attended a few Quidditch matches last week. What exactly did you do at school? You've probably spent the entire month hiding in the principal's office, eating your candy." Karl's harsh questioning and Lucius's look of horror made Dumbledore look very ugly. The old man's expression changed several times, and finally he made up his mind and directly refuted. "What are you talking about? You are slandering me. Do you know that? How can I be completely indifferent to what happens in school? It's Just that as the principal, I have too many things to deal with, such as, for example, in the end, Dumbledore was still stuck. He thought for a long time, but still couldn't come up with an example. Carol, who was sitting in the principal's seat, was dismissive of this. He supported his head with his right hand and spoke slowly. For example, regarding the October syllabus and the plan to strengthen weak subjects among the 4 colleges. For example, regarding the establishment of the Hogwarts Quidditch League, students from 3rd to 7th years are allowed to form their own teams and participate, while utilizing the draft model, form a Hogwarts Quidditch team, and join forces with the other 3 major magic academies to organize the European and American Magic Academy Super League. For example, regarding the Forbidden Forest Magical Creatures Sanctuary, the first phase of the survey project, and the opening of a new magical animal feed experimental site. Karl gave 3 for example in a row, which made Dumbledore's brain freeze. Those old eyes, through the half-moon shaped pupils, stared at Carol sitting in the principal's seat. The corners of his eyes and cheeks twitched wildly, but Karl, sitting in the principal's seat, had such a natural expression and such skillful movements it seemed as if he was more like a young and promising principal, and he himself was more like an old man who should have retired long ago. The previous idea that Karl would be the next mysterious man completely disappeared at this moment. Because Dumbledore knew very well that, even if he gave Tom 20 years, he would not be able to master Hogwarts so thoroughly. But this little bastard in front of him, inexplicably, took less than 2 months to transform the entire Hogwarts. He brought Karl under his control, and during this period, no professor complained to him, and no professor thought Cole was dangerous. Oh no, there is one, but unfortunately, that professor has been in the infirmary for almost 2 months, and has become completely autistic. In other words, what I thought was a month of quiet time turned out to be that I inexplicably became the one who was expelled from Hogwarts. When I woke up, Hogwarts was no longer my own. Dumbledore was extremely depressed at the moment. How did he become an outsider? I'm the principal. This is not right. The look I gave Carol seemed to say, what? An evil little devil. While Dumbledore was staring at Karl, he was also staring at him, and the resentment in his heart was really hard to calm down. He had not expected that there would be such a mistake in such a matter. This was the first time he had made such a mistake this month. In addition to dealing with Cedric, whose eyes were becoming increasingly suspicious, this was the first time that the situation was beyond his control. He had planned everything, but he never imagined that as a school principal, he would not care at all about what happened in the school. He doesn't know anything about what he does. Is it difficult for a headmaster of this level to control Hogwarts? That thing without a nose has studied here for 7 years, but hasn't done anything well. He's really a waste. Even the look in Karl's eyes when he looked at Dumbledore seemed to be saying, what? A useless old thing. The old man and the young just stared at each other until Lucius, who was standing by, couldn't stand the awkward atmosphere anymore and interrupted them. I think Headmaster Dumbledore still cares about the school, but he is old and his memory may have declined a little. We should be considerate of each other, not when you get older, you should retire quickly and give your position to someone who is willing to do the work instead of occupying the office all the time. I don't know what I'm thinking about all day long. Before Lucius could finish his words, Karl spoke directly without giving him any face. These words completely made Dumbledore angry. He suddenly stood up and said dissatisfiedly, how can you say that, Mr. Hohenzollern? You have to learn to respect me. I'm your principal. Then you should take responsibility. Karl also retorted, besides, what's the principal? I'm still your creditor. Just like that, the eye contact between the old and the young escalated into a verbal quarrel. They were arguing with each other and having a great time, which made Lucius, who was watching from the side, feel as if he was having an illusion. He had a feeling before that Karl's bright blue eyes were very similar to Dumbledore's now. Watching the two of them arguing in front of him, he always had the illusion that it was a quarrel between father and son. Chapter 73 Dumbledore is helpless. Under Lucius's gaze, Dumbledore and Cole were passionately exchanging words with each other. As the words of the exchange became increasingly vulgar, Dumbledore soon lost the upper hand. After all, although he is known as the greatest white wizard of this century, when it comes to the art of swearing, compared with Karl, who came up from the streets of New York, there is at least 5 Voldemorts left. The old man was so scolded that he had no choice but to start playing dirty, pointing angrily at the door of the principal's office and speaking loudly. "You two are not welcome here. Leave my office right now, immediately." Seeing that the other party was cheating, Karl did not tolerate him and took out the parchment signed by Dumbledore himself from the ring. He pointed at the striped money on it and said it bluntly, "Although I have always respected you, the principal, it is only natural to pay back a debt. If you refuse to fulfill the treaty with this attitude, then you have 2 choices now. One is to immediately take out 21,000 gold galleons and pay off the entire amount owed, including the principal and interest, whether you go and confess to Professor McGonagall, or discuss with Mr. Lucius next to you. See if the school board can help you with the money. Otherwise, according to the contract, this office is mine. Now please leave my office immediately." Shock, speechlessness, and all kinds of complicated expressions kept flowing across Dumbledore's face. He was now extremely regretful. "I shouldn't have brought this evil creature to Hogwarts. I underestimated the descendants of the Grindelwald family. My previous thoughts were so naive, thinking that by keeping the Dark Lord under my nose, I could prevent the magical world from seeing another Dark Lord. Now that I think about it, what Professor McGonagall said was right. People from the Grindelwald family are naturally able to restrain Dumbledore. I have been fighting Voldemort for so long and never lost, but this evil creature has been in school for less than 2 months. How could he accept the fact that he had to lose his own office?" Filled with grief and indignation, he cast his last glimmer of hope towards Lucius standing beside him. Lucius quickly turned his face away, thinking, "Why did you two get involved in this quarrel? I'm here to make money. I never thought of getting involved." Seeing the last glimmer of hope shattered, Dumbledore could only sit back in his seat angrily. After hesitating for a long time, he lowered his head and began to concentrate wholeheartedly on finishing the plate of candies in front of him. Seeing that his principal seemed to be a little autistic because of his criticism, Carol wanted to say a few nice words to ease the atmosphere. Unexpectedly, the voice of the dog system in my mind sounded again. "Congratulations to the host. You have successfully scolded your own principal to the point of autism and occupied the other party's principal's office, and you will be awarded 500 points. Currently, you have 376,500 points and have triggered a series of rewards, including the god level art of cursing. You are now the most sweary person on this planet. Please keep up the good work and spray your venom towards the whole world." Hehe, it's still hard to be a good person in this world. I can see that my retreat has been blocked by the dog system. Besides, this old man is really too irritating. I didn't use the art of language to properly praise the other person because I was forced to do so due to my status as a top student at Hogwarts. Thinking of this, Karl, who had completed the moral cycle again, slowly sat back in the principal's seat, took a deep breath and said, "In view of a certain old comrade, he neglected his duties, did not care about the development of the school, and disregarded the collective honor of Hogwarts. We have now issued a serious criticism. In addition, the principal's first speech at the press conference originally scheduled for tomorrow has now been cancelled. Professor McGonagall will represent Hogwarts School and give a speech on stage. The headmaster's duties will be changed to a ceremonial reception." This long string of words made Dumbledore a little confused, so he took advantage of Karl's inattention and looked at Ruth and asked in a low voice, "What the hell are you guys doing?" The more I listen, the more confused I get. "How big of a fuss do you want to make for the so-called press conference tomorrow? Why, even Professor McGonagall is implicated." Hearing this, Lucius was really a little helpless. He didn't expect this to be the case. After all, The entire Hogwarts, the focus of discussion now is basically on tomorrow's broom launch conference, and even the entire British Wizarding world point they had been discussing this for a long time, and feeling helpless, he could only take out this morning's Daily Prophet from his pocket and hand it over. Dumbledore took the newspaper and immediately saw the headline on the front page reporting on tomorrow's press conference point. The entire newspaper, using large font and 2 pages, specially reported this incident, and it was written in detail. Point after carefully watching the entire process of the press conference, Dumbledore, who was previously full of anger, I couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed, because according to the process in the newspaper, I was the headmaster of Hogwarts. It should be at tomorrow's press conference that he will steal the show, along with representatives from the other 2 European magic schools, including some people from the British Ministry of Magic. They will witness this moment. Point. But now, everything has vanished, and with complicated eyes, he slowly looked up at Carol sitting behind the desk. Point. His emotions were extremely complicated. He had never thought that a 15-year-old boy had only been exposed to the magical world for 2 months he can actually achieve this extent. Could it be that, as that guy predicted, Cole will bring real changes to the entire magical world? Point. Leading the arrival of a new era. Point. But before he could free himself from the complicated memories and emotions, Karl, who was sitting in the principal's seat. Point. But the more he looked at Leodang, the more he disliked him. This guy always looked at him with tinted glasses. From the time I entered Hogwarts until now, I always wanted to play the role of a behind-the-scenes operator for Karl. The feeling of someone trying to manipulate him from behind made him feel more disgusted than someone who directly confronted him head on. Point. At the same time, this old guy was nominally his guardian in the magical world, which made it even more difficult for him to accept. Point. I treat you as the principal, but you want to be my father behind my back. That's wishful thinking. Point. So he immediately interrupted Dumbledore's recollections and spoke softly. If you have nothing else to do, please leave the office for a while. If you need any dessert, we have it in the cafeteria. Go and have fun with your classmates. Mr. Lucius and I need to talk about some adult topics. We don't need irrelevant people to be present. By the way, your work tomorrow is not very complicated. I believe you can handle it with your current level. Just keep smiling, Mr. Hohenzollern. If you talk like that, I don't know whether I should say something or not. Karl's words made Dumbledore quite unhappy. He immediately took on the posture of a headmaster and prepared to refute the other party. Point. Unexpectedly, Karl just opened his lips slightly. The payment for 1 day's work is 500 gold galleons. If you have any opinions, you can speak up now. All I can say is, I hope you don't mess up the furnishings in my office. Dumbledore said this in a firm tone and left his office smoothly with Fawkes Lucius, who was standing by, and the portraits hanging on the wall. All couldn't help but hold their foreheads with their hands. Chapter 74. The young principal. After Dumbledore left, Lucius sat in his seat, looking a little uneasy. This was the place he had been sitting in during his student life. Point. He had some impressions of it, but there was no Dumbledore's headmaster's office. This was the first time he saw it. Point. Dumbledore and Hogwarts can almost be equated. Point. When everyone thinks of Hogwarts, the first thing that comes to mind is this great white wizard. But now in this magnificent principal's office. Point. Sitting in the principal's seat was a handsome young man. Point. This gave Lucius a special feeling, as if he had reached another historical node. Point. The last time he felt this way was when he joined the Death Eaters, but unlike him, Carol's face was full of ease and indifference. He slowly stood up and left the principal's seat. Point. He walked over to sit opposite Lucius, then took out a bottle of Hussington's sherry and a box of cigarettes in a silver cigarette case from the ring. Point. He then brought 2 crystal wine glasses, poured a glass for each of them, took out a cigarette, put it in his lips, and snapped his fingers. A ball of orange flame burned at his fingertips. He used the flame to light a cigarette. Amid the smoke, he smiled at Lucius. 100% Virginia tobacco, top-notch enjoyment, and this glass of sherry, from Mexico. The brand has a history of more than years. You can enjoy yourself, Mr. Malfoy. There's no need to be so formal. We are business partners, aren't we? Hearing this, Lucius awkwardly picked up the wine glass and took a sip, but he seemed to hate cigarettes and kept coughing because of the white smoke. Point. He asked in confusion. In fact, I have never understood why muggles like this kind of thing. They know that this kind of thing is harmful to their bodies, but I'm still fascinated by these things. Faced with this question, Karl just smiled indifferently, took a deep puff of his cigarette, and raised his head to let the white smoke rings float toward the ceiling. I don't think there is an answer to this question. Just like you purebloods, you know that letting a psychopath rule the British wizarding world will mean that the world has no future. But why do you support him like that? I think this question, like yours, has no answer. This answer made Lucius shudder all over, and he quickly looked up and wanted to explain point, but he found that Karl was still looking up at the ceiling and didn't meet his eyes, so he could only speak with some stammering. This mysterious person has brought unspeakable harm to the British wizarding world. I have never, listening to the other party's stammering explanation, Karl lowered his head, looked into the other party's eyes, and interrupted him with his hand. Don't be so nervous, Mr. Malfoy. Just like I said when we first met, don't ask about my past. I will definitely not interfere with your past. We are just business partners now. There is no need to be so nervous. Tell me, regarding the acquisition of the Lightwheel Company, are they still so stubborn? Hearing this, Lucius wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, and the look he gave Cole was no longer as casual as before point. Although he knew clearly that the young man in front of him had a very unclear relationship with a group of people in Germany point, but he never found out the real details. It had always been a business transaction, but he only realized it today point. Karl knew much more than he imagined. This boy was definitely not as harmless as he looked point. It can even be said that it is a more direct threat than Voldemort, who could turn against you and kill you at any time and anywhere point. Being with this young man gave him a kind of fear of being alone and facing the unknown of the deep sea. After adjusting his emotions, Lucius tried his best to make his tone sound less frightening. The Nimbus Company was unwilling to pay attention to us, but another flying broom company, Comet Company, gave us advice. They responded positively, but the Lightwheel Company did not turn hostile directly and was willing to send representatives to attend tomorrow's press conference. If you don't want me to, I can send someone to take care of it now. No, Karl said firmly. If someone is willing to come as a guest, there is no reason not to let them attend the banquet. We entertained them warmly, but they didn't give us face. Then don't blame me. We will leave them no chance to live. Hearing this, although Lucius didn't want to refute Karl's face, he couldn't help but say it. The Nimbus Company has always been a top player in the flying broom field. It may not be that easy to overthrow them in a short time. I think we should not be impatient. We can take our time as your product is launched. Hearing this, Karl just smiled indifferently, then kept shaking his head, his expression full of disdain. It wasn't that he was angry about what his business partner had said, but that he was full of disdain for the entire British wizarding world. From the moment he stepped into the magical world, he had clearly realized that his greatest helper was "It's not the dog system in my mind that is about to become perverted, nor is it the memories brought from my past life. Rather, it is the Muggle world's complete crushing of the magical world in terms of its level of understanding in business and other fields. The entire magical world is a bit like a utopia in literary works, which is parasitic on the real world. But they are completely out of touch with the real world. A bit like the King dynasty, which had been closed to the outside world for many years. When they opened their eyes again and looked at the real world. You will find that in your mind. The Muggle world, where you have to do everything by yourself, can never be compared with wizards. It has long since become something they cannot recognize. So in this world, racism, which has been lagging behind in the real world for countless years, has grown. It will also cause a psychopath who only knows how to use violence to cause a stir in the city. Thinking of this, Karl just smiled and said to Lucius, "Don't worry, Mr. Malfoy. Everything will be resolved after tomorrow's press conference. You may think I'm bragging, but what I want to tell you is that judging from the current business situation, what the Nimbus Company did was to court their own destruction. They monopolized the production and sales of high-end flying brooms and made huge profits. Nor has the profit been shared with even one person, be it the British Ministry of Magic or any other partner. Then you don't need to worry at all. We are not the only ones who want them dead. What we need to do is not to try to stop the boiling water by adding more fuel to the fire, but to remove the fuel from under the cauldron, always. Remember one thing, the best businessmen only earn the part of the profit they deserve and give away the rest, no matter whether it seems useful or not. After saying this, Karl drank the sherry in the glass, patted Lucius on the shoulder and smiled. Okay, it's just a brief communication. You can go back and get ready. I still want to enjoy my office. Just like that. Lucius walked out of the office with a head full of question marks and full of doubts. When he walked to the door of the office he couldn't help but look inside again. In the luxurious office, a young man was sitting in the center, as if everything was under control. Even the usually noisy portraits became extremely quiet at this moment, looking at this person with complicated eyes. Young Principal. Chapter 75 Press Conference. This dress is too tight. How can I ride a broomstick? Can I change into something else? Cedric was wearing the Quidditch Hufflepuff House uniform specially made by Karl, and he kept tweaking himself in front of the mirror. No matter how he moved, he felt uncomfortable. The tight leather top and trousers made it difficult for him to breathe. And this dress is a bit too sexy. It makes people feel like they are not wearing anything when they wear it. No, since you've accepted the modeling job, you have to follow the organizer's arrangements. I think this dress is pretty good. If you can lift your buttocks a little more, I think it will be even more perfect. Karl, who was sitting behind Cedric, took a quick glance and immediately gave his own evaluation point, but Cedric was a little unconvinced by this comment. He turned his head and looked at Karl resentfully. Then, why don't you wear it? If your real intention is to attract other people's attention through such revealing clothing, then I'm willing to admit that you are prettier and have a better figure than me, so you will definitely be more attractive in it. And you told me yesterday that you would let me experience the fashion of the Muggle world, and this is the result. Faced with doubts, Carol smiled calmly and said without hesitation, "You're right. So-called fashion is nothing more than the packaging and interpretation of GHS. No matter how the times change, humans are always animals. The premise of appreciating fashion is always the carrier of fashion, which is sexy and beautiful enough. Nothing more than that." As he said that, he stood up and adjusted his clothes in front of the mirror. His outfit today was a standard geek style pointer black wool sweater, paired with a pair of blue jeans, both of which are very loose in style, and a pair of rimless glasses. The feeling given by people is that the previous arrogance is gone, and what remains is just approachable. After checking that there was nothing wrong with his outfit, Karl grabbed Cedric's tie. He pulled the other person in front of him, looked into his eyes and said, "Today is a critical moment. Don't let me down. Otherwise, don't even think about calling it a new flying broom. What you have now will also disappear without a trace. Do you understand? You are not allowed to change my clothes in the middle of the process." After saying that, Karl looked away, no longer paying attention to Cedric, whose face was flushed, and left the Hufflepuff common room. Walking towards the auditorium, the corridors along the way were so empty that I didn't meet a single student. As soon as Karl stepped into the auditorium, he was greeted with thunderous applause. The entire auditorium was already packed with people. Thousands of students from all 7 grades of Hogwarts were eagerly waiting, and the long tables of the 4 major colleges that usually appeared had disappeared. In their place were simple folding chairs and a single sofa in the first row, occupied by Mr. Fudge, the Minister of Magic. Lucius, the representative of the school board, and representatives from the 2 major flying broom companies, Nimbus and Comet, were all sitting in their seats, staring at the stage. What was originally the professor's exclusive seat has been converted into a flat stage. A giant screen stood behind the stage, playing music over and over again. Karl asked an outsourced company to produce the promotional video for Absolute Blade #1. And of course this huge magic LCD screen. It was also produced by the new company Magic Optics, founded by Karl and Lucius. He had thought about it since that day in the charms class, when Karl expanded the luminescent spell into a color version. Using magic pattern engraving techniques, the idea of creating an ultra-thin LCD display with magic was put forward in advance. As he always said, a true capitalist can earn his profits with every move. Well, dear students, respected professors, and all the leaders and business seniors who are willing to condescend to come here, please extinguish your burning fun for a moment and welcome everyone to this press conference. I know many of you have never seen this new business model, but don't be fooled. You can respond with contempt, but don't be too surprised and feel a little wary. Hogwarts will always be the most dynamic school in the British wizarding world, and our new generation of students will always be the most dynamic group, just like magic only shines in the hands of the most special group. So, let us embrace an open mind and welcome the arrival of a new era in the field of flying brooms. As soon as he stepped onto the stage, Karl immediately began his performance, and he controlled the rhythm of his speech very well. Just like a perfect melody, it can suddenly accelerate when it is urgent and flow slowly when it is necessary. With his perfect look today and his god-level acting ability, he tried his best to replicate the press conference performance style of Boss Joe and CEO Lay. We try to keep a distance from the audience in terms of professional level, and try to bring them closer in terms of perception and heart. With just 3 or 2 sentences, the rhythm of the entire game is completely under control. Karl immediately started the most important part of the press conference, bragging. He pressed the button in his hand, and various PPTs, such as those about the new flying broom, immediately appeared on the big screen behind him. Aerodynamic data in comparison with similar products, according to the data from the wind tunnel test at the American Flight Center, our flying broom can fly at high speeds. The flight resistance is less than half of similar competitors' products. At the same time, thanks to the dedicated help of Professor Flitwick, our core acceleration spell is 25% higher than that of our competitors' products with the same unit power, so the overall performance has been improved. Having said that, Karl also paused deliberately, just like the CEOs of technology companies in his previous life. Then he pressed the button in his hand, and the PPT behind him changed again, with a huge 125% marked in eye-catching red font. This immediately caused cheers from many students. They stood up one after another, and clapped their hands vigorously. The thunderous applause was like a tsunami. Wave after wave pushed onto the stage, and Karl struck, while the iron was hot, shouting loudly, 125%. Performance, whether it is the top speed or the operating performance, is an all-round crushing. This will be a revolutionary generation of products. I believe many people will think that I'm bragging, so please see it for yourself. As he spoke, Karl waved his hand gently, and Professor Snape and Professor Flitwick, who had been sitting in the front row, suddenly stood up. He waved his magic wand, and the candles hanging in the air went out one after another. For a moment, the entire auditorium fell into darkness. At that moment, with a loud noise, a dark shadow dragging colorful light rushed into the auditorium through the gate. Like lightning. He kept flying over the auditorium, performing various difficult moves, including large angle turns, and flipping on the spot during flight. His speed was like a meteor in the sky, but his agility was like a firefly in the courtyard. Finally, after a series of difficult moves, the opponent stopped steadily on the stage, and the moment he stopped, the extinguished candle lit up again, and a handsome young man, riding an elegant and handsome flying broom, stopped there quietly. He kept waving to everyone, and everyone's eyes were attracted by him. Some of them were looking at the flying broom under his, but some are simply attracted by the beautiful English buttocks that are specially lifted up, which are really perky. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.